The Yongzhen Shanhe Temple is gone. Half of the high platform has collapsed. Sections of wooden beams are floating on the water. Emperor Yuanjing's brow twitched sharply. Where is the divine sword? One of the Imperial Guard commanders cupped his fists and said, "We've already sent men to retrieve it." Emperor Yuanjing took a deep breath, walked to the shore, and reached out his hand. He curled his fingers, and a pure yellow glow lit up from under the water. A 3-foot-long bronze arrow broke the surface and flew into Emperor Yuanjing's hand. After a careful look, and seeing it was undamaged, he let out a sigh of relief. Standing upon the 7-star sword, the incomparably beautiful national preceptor, with a fuchin in hand, circled once above Sangbo, before stopping in midair. "Your Majesty, there is nothing unusual about Sangbo." Hearing this, Emperor Yuanjing's expression grew darker. "Nothing unusual." Wei Yuan then turned to the Imperial Guard commander. "Where are the remains of the fallen soldiers?" Commander shouted, "Bring them up." Moments later, over a dozen corpses were carried over, all in the exact same condition, their flesh withered, as if they'd been mummified for decades. One of the guard leaders spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, we detected no powerful enemy entering the city." Yet in their hearts, the commanders knew the true cause of this anomaly was likely related to the mishap during the ancestral ceremony. Perhaps the explosion at Sangbo and the sudden deaths of the patrol had nothing to do with enemy forces, but rather with some hidden secret in Sangbo. Emperor Yuanjing said gravely, "Wei Yuan, accompany me to the imperial study." Wei Yuan immediately bowed and complied. Meanwhile, the eldest princess was startled awake by the bell. The instant she opened her eyes, she didn't reach for her clothes. She drew the long sword that hung by her bedside. The tall, shapely princess brandished a sword gleaming with cold light. Her maids in the side hall also woke up in alarm, rushing over with her clothes in hand. The eldest princess' delicate features held a commanding air. Only after she changed into a lighter, more form-fitting outfit, the eldest princess was still holding her long sword as she hurried to Emperor Yuanjing's bedchamber, but was stopped by the Imperial Guard stationed there. All the more so at a time like this, princes and princesses must not approach the emperor. The eldest princess did not force her way in. Instead, she thought carefully, wondering what had happened to the night watchers and elite warriors of the armies. If no formidable foe had invaded, the Imperial Guards would not have been so openly alarmed. Yet if a powerful enemy from another nation had entered, things seemed far too quiet. Moreover, no one from the Astronomer Division, Tianjian, had come. At that moment, the Crown Prince of the Eastern Palace and several other princes and princesses arrived with their people. They too had rushed over. A quarter of an hour later, the doors of the imperial study opened. A eunuch in a blue robe emerged. Of all present, the eldest princess had the closest ties to Wei Yuan, even counting as half a disciple of his. She called softly, "Duke Wei?" Wei Yuan sighed. The collapse of the Yongzhen Shanhe Temple was the work of evildoers, but they have long since vanished. The crown prince stepped forward and asked, "Does it have anything to do with what happened at the ancestral ceremony?" Wei Yuan shook his head. "His Majesty has ordered me to uncover the truth within half a month and capture the culprits. I have told His Majesty frankly, this case will not be easy." With that, he departed in haste. A flicker of thought crossed the eldest princess's gaze. Just then, the grand eunuch in a tawny robe emerged. "Your Highnesses, His Majesty summons you." The crown prince led the princes and princesses, who had come to check the situation, into the imperial study. They saw Emperor Yuanjing seated on a meditation cushion, across from the mysterious female, national preceptor. They sat neither too close nor too far, like two Taoists. A moment later, Emperor Yuanjing seemed to awaken from his meditative state, opened his eyes and sighed. "National preceptor, I'm still ill at ease." The female national preceptor spoke. "Your Majesty, you need new medicine to cure it." Emperor Yuanjing gazed upon her flawless face and said with a sigh, "Indeed, I have a malady of the heart. I've been waiting for the national preceptor to undergo dual cultivation with me." At these words, the faces of the princes and princesses turned awkward, except for the eldest princess and the crown prince, who remained expressionless and kept their thoughts to themselves. 10 years ago, Emperor Yuanjing had already proposed dual cultivation to the national preceptor, yet she declined. He even decreed that she would be named imperial consort, and still she refused. Because he still relied on her to further his path of immortality, he had no choice but to give up. Outsiders merely thought he was coveting her prodigious talent, but with 3,000 beauties in the harem, he could have any woman he wanted. Even that famed, most beautiful woman in the capital, the Wang Fei, was once a member of the imperial harem. Yet back then, Emperor Yuanjinghe was already cultivating in seclusion, never so much as laid a finger on her. What Yuanjing truly yearned for was immortality. As his eldest son, the crown prince was the first to speak. Father, is this related to the anomaly at the ancestral ceremony? Emperor Yuanjing frowned, unwilling to explain further. The crown prince gave a covert signal to the second princess. Dressed in luxurious attire, her figure alluring, Princess Linen smiled, twisted her waist, and sidled up to Emperor Yuanjing, cooing, "Father, Sangbo is our imperial family's forbidden zone. What kind of villain could sneak into Sangbo and destroy the temple of our ancestor emperor? Couldn't that same person also slip into my manor?" Among all the princes and princesses, the second princess was the most favored because she knew how to pout and cajole to win Emperor Yuanjing's affection. Yuanjing was a forceful ruler with a strong desire for control. He might not care for the talented yet headstrong eldest princess, but he absolutely favored the sweet-talking second princess. With a half-smile, Yuanjing chided, "Nonsense. Can anyone just waltz into the palace's forbidden grounds and leave again at will?" At that moment, the eldest princess stepped forward, bowed and said, "Just now at the palace gates, I ran into Lord Wei. He implied to me that this case will be most difficult. Perhaps he wants me to intercede on his behalf, to buy him a little more time. Father, I happen to know a master detective. If he could join this case, I'm certain he could solve it. Within half a month, he'd definitely unearth the truth." At the mention of this, the crown prince cast a sidelong glance, and the eldest princess had the same thought. Huiqing is trying to promote her own people again. There are two ways princes and princesses expand their influence. One is to draw in court officials and make them supporters. But due to Emperor Yuanjing's strong desire for control and his consummate imperial cunning, none of the princes, including the crown prince, dares openly to form factions. The second way is to promote trusted followers. That's their usual tactic. Emperor Yuanjing asked, "Huiqing, do you have someone in mind?" The eldest princess replied, "The bronze gong of the night watchers, Su Qian." The second princess gasped in sudden realization, then said innocently, "Ah, the bronze gong, who showed so much admiration for you at the ancestral ceremony. You were laughing and chatting with him, sister." At those words, the other princes and princesses froze. What a barbed remark. After all, the eldest princess is still unmarried, even though Emperor Yuanjing has been obsessed with cultivation in recent years and pays little attention to his children's marriages. It's improper for a princess to be too close to potential suitors, is it not? Ignoring the insinuation, the eldest princess continued, "Father, you may have heard of him. He's the jade token from the silver tax case. The nephew of Su Pingji, a 100 household officer." At this, Emperor Yuanjing finally showed interest. "I do recall someone like that. He also produced counterfeit silver. If it didn't degrade over time, I would have had the astrologer division make it in large quantities." The eldest princess pressed on, "And that's not all. He performed outstandingly as a constable in Changle County. Take the Liu Bo murder case." Emperor Yuanjing cut her off with a sigh. "Enough. There's no need to go on, is there?" The eldest princess lowered her head and bowed. "Father, please understand, just yesterday, that Tongluo bronze gong, Su Qian, clashed with a silver gong at the yamen and cut him down with a single slash, leaving him gravely wounded. According to the law, striking a superior is punishable by execution. He's currently locked up in the dungeon. Father, I can request that you allow him to atone for his crime by meritorious service." Emperor Yuanjing did not hesitate and said in a calm tone, "Zhang Huiqing speaks on his behalf, so I'll grant him a chance to redeem himself. He may assist in this investigation. But if the culprit who destroyed the ancestor emperor's temple is not caught within half a month, I'll simply have him beheaded." Hearing these words, the eldest princess once again bowed in thanks. The princes and princesses then left the imperial study. Afterward, the second princess sulked. "Damn it, Huiqing has beaten me to it again." The crown prince merely shook his head. "That may not be a good thing. Even Lord Wei considers this case thorny, so Huiqing's only made a small move. If that bronze gong of hers truly manages to crack the case, then good for her. But if he fails, she loses nothing. He was already facing execution anyway." The second princess asked, "Brother, what on earth happened at the Yongzhen Shanha temple?" The crown prince gestured for silence, then said quietly, "It's not so simple. Otherwise, Wei Yuan wouldn't look so grim. I'm afraid only father knows the whole truth. Someday, I might know it as well," he added inwardly, "but who can say when?" Just then, the eldest princess suddenly called after them. Princess Linen snapped, "What do you want?" Sword in hand, the eldest princess strode over and suddenly flicked the scabbard against the second princess's shapely rear. Princess Linen teared up. "Huiqing, I'll kill you for this." The crown prince scowled. "Huiqing, you've gone too far." The eldest princess replied calmly, "I was merely testing Linen's skill. If she's not convinced, she's welcome to spar with me." The second princess watched her retreating figure, wailing that she would complain to father. The crown prince could only shrug. "Another day. Father's in no mood to deal with you right now." Princess Linen bit her lip in frustration, muttering curses under her breath. "Just you wait. One day, I'll take away everything you have." Early the next morning, Yang Yin yawned and said, looks like we won't have to rack our brains to save him after all. It seems the work's already been done. Wei Yuan merely gave a meaningful smile and did not respond. Yesterday, the eldest princess sent people to investigate in detail the conflict between Su Qian and Zhu Changzhu. It seems she's taking an interest in him. Wei Yuan even hinted to the eldest princess last night. Out of mutual understanding between smart people, she seized the chance to recommend Su Qian to His Majesty so that he could render service in atonement. That way, Su Qian would be formally pardoned, and no one could say otherwise. After a pause, Yang Yin furrowed his brow. But what if Su Qian fails to crack the case? In half a month, Wei Yuan smiled. Then he has only death. After that, he'll enter the Jianghu. At that point, Su Qian will be free from official records, he said mysteriously. Zhang Luzhong and Yang Yan's expressions grew serious at once. So Godfather thinks so highly of him? Wei Yuan seemed to recall something, then ordered someone, send word to Li Yuchen. His Majesty has specially permitted Su Qian to serve and atone for his crime. He must read the imperial edict aloud to him, and then... Wei Yuan paused, wearing a faint, playful smile. Make it a grand affair. Inside the Night Watcher's jail, Su Qian was currently relieving his swollen bladder when a group of colleagues suddenly burst in, startling him so much that he jerked and peed on his own hand. Song Tingfeng laughed loudly. Ning Yin, you're off the hook. His Majesty has granted you a chance to atone instead of dying. Su Qian froze. His first thought was, damn. Number one is actually the emperor, but he dismissed that idea at once, then casually wiped his hand on Song Tingfeng's shoulder before asking calmly, what's going on? On the way out of the jail, Song Tingfeng told him everything in detail. Su Qian's pupils constricted slightly. Sangbo exploded? Yongzhen Shanhe temple collapsed? That means my earlier guess was correct. The cry for help I heard wasn't me. I just happened to hear it for some special reason. So, who in Sangbo was actually calling for help? And who was that plea really directed at? He had only heard it because of some peculiarity. But if it wasn't for him, then who in Sangbo needed rescuing? Su Qian. After a long pause, Chenin asked, what about the divine sword that was enshrined? Song Tingfeng shook his head, saying he didn't know much. He was dismissed because of your fiasco. After you were thrown into the dungeon, he went straight to the Howie Tower and cursed out the entire yamen, openly slapping Lord Wei in the face. Su Qian felt a surge of emotion. That was exactly the sort of thing Brother Chun would do. Anyway, by the way, Yudo said once Officer Xiao Jing was dismissed, he left. So Wei Yuan must not have. Even if His Majesty hadn't issued a pardon, Papa Wei would probably have found some justifiable excuse to save my neck anyway. As the three of them approached the main gate, they suddenly heard the pounding of a gong. Li Yuchen, escorted by several bronze gongs, entered the yamen. The lead bronze gong was beating an ordinary gong, shouting, make way for Li Yin, Lord Official. Various clerks and night watchers came out to see what was going on, pointing at Li Yuchen as he passed. Brother Chun was red-faced, hanging his head while walking. At this, Su Qian suggested, Chief, let's not disturb him. He's got his promotion, which is great and all, but we'd only be adding to his embarrassment. It was too humiliating for them anyway. Clearly Brother Chun was being pranked by Wei Yuan. You shamed him in public yesterday, and now he's beating the gong to shame you in return. Su Qian silently decided never again to cross Wei Yuan lightly. People who lose face like that tend not to be very forgiving. Over half an hour later, Su Qian returned to the Su residence. He first gave his family the good news. Su Xinyan exclaimed happily. So the eldest princess stepped in so soon? Su Qian paused thoughtfully. The eldest princess. No wonder Emperor Yuanjing learned about a small fry like me. So it was she who recommended me to him. Of course it might also be that Lord Wei seized the opportunity to set up a way for me to redeem myself. Su Qian said, don't celebrate too soon. Something's come up. He sighed, then feigned remorse. I must have worried Aunt sick these past 2 days. When Su Qian said this, he added, Aunt stayed up all night worrying about me. Upon hearing this, his aunt erupted, glaring fiercely at her outspoken son. Su Xinyan quickly changed the subject. Father went to the astrologer division yesterday, hoping to plead with the white-robed sorcerers, but he received bad news. Jianjing is ill. Su Qian froze upon hearing this. Jianjing is sick? A grade 1 sorcerer can get sick, and he's part of a system dedicated to saving lives and healing the wounded. Su Qian's detective instincts immediately kicked in. Could it have something to do with the anomaly at Sangbo? Surely Jianjing didn't just catch a cold while meditating on the 8 trigrams platform? Su Xinyan continued. I don't know the details. I'll head over to reassure father and calm him down. Su Qian nodded. Go ahead. I'm going to check on Lingyue and Lingyin. Then I need to return to the yamen later. As Su Xinyan reached the door, he suddenly remembered something and said, oh right. That mirror you wanted is in the study. Go grab it later. Also, The monk you were looking for has left. He said he found a lead on something related to the wetlands. Hearing this, Su Qian finally understood. So that's why number 1 couldn't possibly be the emperor. Number 1 wasn't even aware of this. My Papa Wei and the eldest princess are the real deal. Su Qian went to the backyard, where he saw little Doubting sitting gloomily under the eaves, playing with mud. Even this silly little child knew that Big Brother was in trouble. She was too upset to play with her little goose. Su Qian stopped a short distance away and teased, "Whose silly child is this?" Little Doubting immediately raised her head, staring at him blankly. A few seconds later, her face lit up with a radiant smile, and she waddled over on her little legs, arms outstretched, running towards Su Qian. Su Qian also ran toward her, but Little Doubting ended up hugging empty air. Su Qian sidestepped and caught his elder cousin instead. Su Lingyue wrapped her arms tightly around Su Qian's waist, burying her soft body into her cousin's embrace, crying her heart out. Meanwhile, Little Doubting stood alone in the wind, utterly bewildered. After a long while, they finally let go of each other. Su Qian turned to Lu Yi and said, "Go tell the servants to heat some water. I need a bath and a change of clothes." At this moment, Little Doubting hopped in place twice, excitedly saying, "I'm going to tell Mommy." She probably... Su Qian teased, "You're this happy because you think you can eat 3 bowls of rice tonight, aren't you?" Little Doubting was stunned. Terrified, she ran away, unable to believe Big Brother. Meanwhile, Lu Yi went to pass on the message. When the servants heard they needed to heat water for Su Qian's bath, they immediately remembered the servant who had fainted outside Su Qian's room before. In a hurry, they all refused and ran away. Lu Yi was left standing there, completely baffled as to why they were so panicked. After bathing, Su Qian donned his night watcher uniform and sat with Little Doubting under the eaves. The two sat side by side, each holding a big bowl of egg and pork noodles. Su Qian smiled and said, "Ling Yin, Big Brother will trade you some pork for your eggs, okay?" Little Doubting shook her head vigilantly. "No, Mom said Big Brother tricked me out of my buns last time." After saying this, Little Doubting spat twice into her bowl of egg noodles. Su Qian was left dumbfounded. Little Doubting declared seriously, "Second brother taught me this." Su Qian silently cursed to himself. Scholars are truly terrible people, but he decided to scare Little Doubting a bit, saying, "Ling Yin, noodles with spit in them can't be eaten. It's poisonous." Little Ling Yin's eyes widened. "Will I die?" Su Qian continued his bluff. "You won't die, but your stomach will hurt for many days." Relieved by this answer, Little Ling Yin resumed eating her noodles. "As long as I won't die, it's fine." After finishing his meal, Su Qian went to Su Erlang's room. In the study, he found the mirror he was looking for. By chance, he noticed a few sheets of paper on the corner of the desk. Out of curiosity, he saw that they were filled with dense, messy handwriting. It was an analysis of Su Qian's current situation, as well as an evaluation of whether the Directorate of Celestial Observations and Yunlu Academy could contribute. Su Qian smiled to himself. "My little brother has some talent." At the Howie Tower of the Night Watcher's Yamen, Wei Yuan spoke with deliberate precision. "This case, I've assigned Jin Yutong, Chunfeng Hall, and the lead investigator will be you." Su Qian was taken aback. Wei Yuan smiled and added, "This is by His Majesty's direct decree." Su Qian suddenly understood. Wei Yuan intended to use this opportunity to elevate him, assigning him as the lead investigator, rather than just part of the team. Su Qian opened the case file and carefully read through it. He then asked bluntly, "Is something sealed beneath Sangbo?" A flicker of surprise crossed Wei Yuan's face, and Yang Yan also looked shocked. Something was indeed sealed in Sangbo. Wei Yuan had only told him this morning. Even Nangong Qianro, who was smarter, had only vaguely guessed at it last night, after connecting the dots, while reviewing documents and records in the archives. But this young bronze gong had directly deduced that something was sealed beneath Sangbo. Wei Yuan quickly masked his surprise and asked with a smile, "Explain your reasoning." Su Qian responded, "Sangbo may be imperial territory, but to outsiders, its only valuable item would be the nation-stabilizing divine sword. However, the case file states that the divine sword is unharmed, so the culprits must have been targeting something else. That leads me to suspect that something else is hidden in Yongjin Shanha Temple. And why is it hidden in Sangbo? I dare to speculate that it requires the divine sword to suppress it." Su Qian probed further. "You knew about this, didn't you, Lord Wei?" Wei Yuan shook his head frankly. His Majesty did not explain it clearly, but I have my suspicions. As for your task, Wei Yuan continued, it is to find out who destroyed Yongjin Shanha Temple. Recovering that item is not your concern. If you encounter a problem you can't solve, report it to Yang Jinluo for assistance. He will step in. After that, Wei Yuan took out a golden plaque. This was bestowed by His Majesty. With it, you can move freely in the Imperial City, except for the inner palace and a few special places. This plaque grants you unrestricted access. Su Qian accepted the order and left. Wei Yuan watched his back as he departed. Only then did he turn to Yang Yin and say, "Did you hear that Jianzheng is ill?" Yang Yin nodded. Wei Yuan's gaze grew deep, and after a long pause, he laughed. "That old man." Su Qian hurried to Chunfeng Hall and immediately summoned the silver gongs of Jinyutang and Zhenxia Hall to gather in the front courtyard. Li Yuchen stared at him for a moment before exclaiming, "Are you in charge?" Su Qian flashed the golden plaque. "I'm now the lead investigator appointed by His Majesty. Starting today, let's keep things clear. I'll call you Chief. You'll call me Sir. Now, Chief, go fetch the 2 silver gongs for me." Li Yuchen walked off in frustration, muttering, "This is all so odd." Before long, the team was assembled. This mission included 3 silver gongs and 12 bronze gongs. Aside from Chunfeng Hall's brother Chun, there was a silver gong from Zhenxia Hall, surname Yang, given name Feng, a tall, dark-skinned middle-aged man with a large black mole between his eyebrows. The silver gong from Jinyutang was a burly man with a full beard. At this moment, Su Qian stepped forward and announced loudly, "Last night, an explosion occurred at Sangbo, destroying Yongzhen Shanha Temple. His Majesty is furious and has ordered the Yamen to uncover the truth within and capture the culprits. By His Majesty's decree, I will personally lead the investigation. The rest of you are to assist me. Do your utmost to repay the Emperor's grace." In his heart, Su Qian silently added, "If I succeed, I'll enjoy wealth and luxury. If I fail, it'll be my head on the chopping block." The group responded in unison, as they were all under Yang Yan's command, both silver gongs and bronze gongs alike. Everyone was quite cooperative. The water surface at Sangbo was completely clean. There was nothing there. Who would have thought that just a few days ago, a grand ancestral worship ceremony was held here? Su Qian's group boarded a small boat and paddled to the center of the lake. At this point, Yang Silvergong glanced at Su Qian and said, "Sir Su, let me go down." Su Qian replied, "Then let's both go down together." With that, Su Qian activated his water-breathing technique and dived into the water alongside Yang Feng. He strained his eyes to observe the underwater environment. The collapsed platform's breach was more than 3 meters below the surface. Yang Silvergong also inspected it, taking in the details of the shattered white jade platform. He immediately formed some judgments in his mind, but kept his thoughts to himself, planning to test this young bronze gong entrusted with great responsibility after they returned to the surface. At that moment, Yang Silvergong noticed that Su Qian was diving deeper along the platform's foundation. Yang decided not to follow and returned to the surface on his own. Su Qian continued observing underwater. Stone pillars centered around the white jade platform's foundation were arranged in a unique and precise pattern. It seemed to form a type of formation. In the capital of the Dafeng dynasty, only the Directorate of Celestial Observations had the knowledge to create such formations. In other words, back then, the Directorate of Celestial Observations was also involved in constructing Yongzhen Shanha Temple. From this, it could be inferred that apart from the current emperor, Jianzheng, that old rascal, also knew the secrets of Sangbo. So Jianzheng's illness is real. It might even have been caused by the collapse of Yongzhen Shanha Temple. What secret is hidden here? The forces scheming for Sangbo's secrets, and the culprits who destroyed Yongzhen Shanha Temple, must be at a king's level of power. I'm just a lowly bronze gong meddling in this, and it feels like I could be collateral damage in a battle of immortals at any moment. Even if I uncover the truth, will the imperial family even allow me to live? Thinking about this, Su Qian felt a heavy burden in his heart. However, Wei Yuan has already pointed me in the right direction. If I encounter unsolvable problems, I am to notify Yang Jinluo. This hint is clear enough. I am merely a pawn exploring the path, a hound tracking the scent. If worst comes to worst, I can always fake my death to escape and leave the capital far behind. As these thoughts crossed his mind, Su Qian noticed strange, tadpole-like characters carved on the surface of the stone pillars. But his limited literacy prevented him from deciphering them. Soon, Su Qian emerged from the water and returned to the boat. Li Yuchen stared at him in surprise. "You don't seem like a new recruit," Su Qian replied innocently. "I just meditate for 2 hours a day." Brother Chun, unwilling to discuss the matter further, he glanced at Yang Silvergong and said, "Yang wasn't convinced. When he came up, he analyzed the underwater situation for us. He said if your analysis matches his, he would be convinced." Su Qian responded calmly. "From the break in the platform, we can deduce that the explosion point was inside the temple, not underwater. Furthermore, the gunpowder was likely hidden in the temple. After the ancestral ceremony ended, it couldn't have been more than an hour after the ceremony concluded. If it had been hidden earlier, the strong smell of gunpowder would have surely alerted His Majesty upon entering the temple. So the only opportunity was right after the ceremony ended. Yang Yinluo, go and bring in the officials responsible for the cleanup, and the officials from the Supreme Court and Ministry of Justice for interrogation. Lu, notify the Yamen to request a few white-robed officials from the Directorate of Celestial Observations to assist in the investigation. Also, I need Lady Kaiwei from the Directorate of Celestial Observations to help me. Me and Luo, come with me to check the records of the gunpowder factory. There's no way such a large quantity of gunpowder could have been smuggled out unnoticed. But before we do that, we must first investigate the incident involving the fallen clans. The three silver gongs exchanged glances. Realizing this young man seemed quite reliable in his work. His task assignments were organized, and his thinking was clear and logical. The military camp near Sangbo. Su Qian lifted the white cloth and examined the tragic state of each corpse. Yang Feng noticed his increasingly serious expression and couldn't help but ask, "Do you know how to examine corpses? What have you discovered?" Su Qian calmly replied, "I've made a big discovery. I've realized I'm just a lowly bronze gong. When it comes to combat, it's up to you three adults." The three silver gongs exchanged glances again, speechless. All the fallen clans shared the same death state. Their essence and blood had been drained by some kind of sorcery, and there were no external wounds. This kind of method isn't something Qi practitioners can deal with. Soon, Su Qian led a group to the Gunpowder Bureau. He sought out the official in charge and demanded, "I need to inspect the production and usage records of gunpowder for the past month. Accounting records are easy to falsify, and the most common trick is exaggerating usage. This way, excess gunpowder can be privately hoarded. These tricks don't hold up under scrutiny. Every crime leaves traces." Su Qian didn't trust the Gunpowder Bureau official and sent men to the Night Watcher's Yamen to summon dozens of his own clerks. A large group poured into the Gunpowder Bureau. Soon after, an informant returned with news. 3 officials from the Supreme Court and Ministry of Justice were missing, as were 3 palace attendants. All those involved in the cleanup after the ancestral ceremony had been detained by the Ministry of Justice and Prefecture Office. They refused to hand them over to us. Yang Silvergong is currently in a standoff with the Ministry of Justice. They're at an impasse. Su Qian sneered. "They dare to fight us Night Watchers over this?" A bronze gong explained. The Ministry of Justice and Prefecture Office also received orders from His Majesty. They're tasked with investigating the case. Everyone is acting under royal orders. They can't distinguish between us. Yang Silvergong didn't have an imperial gold token, so he sent me to urgently inform you, my lord. The Emperor has simultaneously involved the Ministry of Justice and Prefecture Office in this case. This isn't surprising. Many major cases are jointly investigated by multiple departments. A single yamen lacks the manpower to handle it alone. The advantages of joint investigations are obvious, but so are the disadvantages. The main issue is competition for credit. Su Qian must secure a significant achievement in this case. Only then will the court pardon him from his death sentence. If he fails to contribute, he'll likely face execution at the Kaisher market. Anyone who obstructs my investigation, I won't show mercy. At the Ministry of Justice, Yang Feng and 6 bronze gongs were stopped outside. Both sides were in a standoff. A middle-aged officer leading the Ministry of Justice's team shouted, "The Ministry of Justice is investigating under imperial orders. Anyone trespassing or obstructing the investigation will be killed without mercy." Yang Feng's forehead creased with anger. The Ministry of Justice knows full well that the Night Watchers are also ordered to participate in this case, but they're intentionally keeping us out. It's clear they're stalling us. This is blatant hostility. Su Qian drew the musket at his waist and fired without hesitation. The bolt streaked through the air. The middle-aged officer unsheathed his saber, deflecting the incoming bolt with a precise slash. Years of military training surged through him. This little bronze gong dared to shoot at him? Killing him today would be justified. The officer shouted angrily, "Trespassing the ministry means death." Su Qian displayed the imperial gold token and said coldly, "I'm investigating under imperial orders. Step aside." The officer sneered, "The ministry is also investigating under imperial orders. Unrelated individuals are forbidden from entry. However, if you insist, we'll send someone to report first." Su Qian's anger flared. The Ministry of Justice wants to sever this lead and delay me for a few days. By the time they've invested and reaped the rewards, or if the lead turns out to be worthless, only then will they hand over the suspects to me. They're clearly trying to undermine us, and I'm a criminal with a reprieve. Time is life. Thinking of this, Su Qian coldly said, "If you insist on blocking me, don't blame me for using the privilege of the imperial token." The middle-aged officer burst out laughing. "You think you can act first and report later? A mere bronze gong like you, killing someone at the gates of the Ministry of Justice?" Su Qian held his blade in his right hand. With a flick of his wrist, a line of blood splattered in the air. The officer's head was severed from his body. The surrounding guards immediately descended into chaos. A standoff is one thing, but a murder? That escalates the situation. Even though the Night Watchers were arrogant on normal days, they'd never gone this far. Killing someone at the gates of one of the 6 ministries, in broad daylight. And it was someone from the Ministry of Justice. Su Qian was exhausted at this point. This damn technique only lasts for 3 seconds. It's completely useless for prolonged fights. I'll have to find a better one someday. Suppressing his fatigue, Su Qian pulled out the imperial token. I'm investigating under imperial orders. Those who obstruct me will be executed. His sharp gaze swept over the guards. Stand down. Leading 2 silver gongs and 12 bronze gongs, Su Qian stormed into the Ministry of Justice. Min Shan frowned. You're too impulsive. Killing someone outside the Ministry of Justice, and it was an official at that. Aren't you afraid of the consequences? Su Qian's face remained stoic. He replied coldly. Do I even have a future? I'm already at a dead end. For me right now, handling this case is a matter of life and death. The Ministry of Justice and the Night Watchers have never gotten along, and now with this rivalry for credit, these people are just obstacles to my investigation. If I'm not ruthless, there'll just be a second, and a third person coming to block me. If I cut down one fool who doesn't know their place today, others will think twice before doing the same tomorrow. The 2 silver gongs, under Yang Jinlua's command, both questioned me, doubting my ability to handle this case, let alone Tiger Tally and the Ministry of Justice. The 2 silver gongs exchanged awkward glances. After all, in the beginning, they too doubted Su Qian. Now that it was pointed out, the 2 of them could only offer awkward smiles and say, Lord Su, we underestimated you. Inside the Ministry of Justice's council hall, on the right sat the senior officials, led by the second-rank Minister of Justice. On the left sat the lower-ranking officials, led by the fourth-rank Provincial Prefect Chen Fuyin. Su Qian stepped over the threshold under their watchful gazes. Su Qian cupped his fists and said, This official, Su Qian, greets all esteemed lords. He swept his eyes over the crowd, and noticed a familiar-looking woman. It was Lu Qing, one of Jinzhou Prefecture's constables. She also noticed him, a glimmer of intrigue flashing in her eyes. Sitting next to Lu Qing was Chen Fuyin, someone Su Qian could consider an old acquaintance. At that moment, a Ministry of Justice official pointed angrily at Su Qian and said, For such a major case, the Night Watchers didn't even send a silver gong? I'll file a formal complaint tomorrow. Su Qian calmly replied, The Night Watchers investigating a case don't need to report to the Ministry of Justice. I've heard the ministry has detained officials from the Court of Judicial Review, the Ministry of Rights, and even palace staff, and obstructed the Night Watchers from questioning them, Minister. May I ask why? The Minister of Justice, who had met Su Qian once before, stayed silent. He didn't even spare him a glance. With a blank expression, he simply took a sip of tea. Taking a sip of tea was clearly a dismissal gesture. Su Qian smirked slightly, but didn't argue further. He quietly found a seat and sat down. Just then, a clerk rushed in, whispering something to a ministry official. The official's expression changed dramatically, and he said in a flustered tone, Minister, Lord Lu, the Night Watchers, they killed someone at the Ministry of Justice gates, and it was a ranked officer. How audacious, how arrogant. This absolutely warrants severe punishment. Minister Sun's expression didn't change as he said, Justice and the law serve to alleviate the emperor's burdens, and to speak on behalf of the people. Guards. Su Qian interrupted loudly, his tone laced with sarcasm. This official is investigating under imperial decree. If the Ministry of Justice interferes with the investigation, I will exercise the privilege of the gold token and act first, report later. Furthermore, I suspect the Ministry of Justice is colluding with the culprits, and may even be responsible for the destruction of the Yongzheng Shanha Temple. Minister Sun, why don't you come with me to the Night Watchers headquarters? Minister Sun and the other officials from the Ministry of Justice exchanged incredulous glances. They could hardly believe what they were hearing. Was this really something a lowly copper gong dared to say? Minister Sun held immense power as a second-rank official, one of the central pillars of the court. Yet this mere copper gong dared to speak so brazenly, as if Minister Sun wasn't even worth acknowledging. Officials from the Ministry of Justice instinctively looked at their superior, only to see Prefect Chun humming a little tune, pretending not to notice. A furious ministry official barked, How dare you insult Minister Sun like this? Do you even value your life? Su Qian stepped forward, placing one hand on his blade as he stared down the officials. If the Ministry of Justice can't solve the case, I will. If the ministry can't kill the culprits, then I will. Su Qian pulled out the gold token bestowed by the emperor, flicked his wrist and bang! The gold token embedded itself into the floor. Obstruct me again, and I'll take down the entire Ministry of Justice with you. Am I clear enough? The council hall fell into silence. What's going on with the Night Watchers headquarters? What's going on with Wei Yuan? Sending this hot-headed rookie to handle the case? Isn't this like throwing troops into the enemy's grasp? Just based on these remarks, we could throw him into the ministry prison, where he'd never see daylight again. Tomorrow, we'll file a joint complaint against Wei Yuan. Let's see how he explains this. At that moment, a eunuch in a court robe chuckled. Ah, youthful vigor and sharp edges indeed. Allow me to introduce this copper gong. He's the one recommended by the princess, and personally appointed by the emperor as the lead investigator for this case. By the way, he was previously sentenced to be executed in 7 days, for injuring his superior, as ruled by Wei Gong. But His Majesty, in his mercy, granted him the chance to atone through service. The Ministry of Justice officials suddenly fell silent. A lead investigator appointed by the emperor? No wonder he dares to act so boldly. He injured his superior. was sentenced to execution, and his murderous aura makes sense. He's a desperate man on the edge of survival. Solving the case is his only chance at life. People like him are prone to extreme measures. If pushed too far, he'd probably take a few others down with him. The Grand Eunuch calmly said, "Everyone, be seated. The Sangbo case is of great importance, and His Majesty holds it in higher regard than the tax silver case. I have been appointed as the overseer, tasked with ensuring you all handle this properly. The night watchers arriving saves me the trouble of seeking you out for a conversation later." Su Qian cupped his fists respectfully toward him. This eunuch seems to be leaning in my favor, or more accurately, in favor of the night watchers. Could it be because of Wei Yuan? Song Tingfeng, ever cooperative, stepped forward and presented the gold token, using it as a secondary layer of deterrence. The effect was excellent. He successfully reinforced his image as a desperate, reckless brute, which would help solve many problems to come. If the Ministry of Justice or the local magistrates wanted to compete for credit, they would now think twice. As for whatever trouble this might invite later, Su Qian didn't care. First, he trusted Wei Yuan to shield him from harm. Second, if he failed to solve the case, he wouldn't have to worry about any fallout anyway. Either he'd die, or he'd leave the capital forever. The eunuch, sipping his tea, said, "All three involved offices have reported missing personnel. These missing individuals are likely spies, assisting the culprits in smuggling gunpowder. What are your thoughts?" Chen Fuyin spoke up. "My office has already investigated. The families of the 9 missing individuals are still in the capital, and know nothing about their relatives' disappearances." They were silenced. An official from the Ministry of Justice remarked, "There must still be spies hidden within the 3 offices. The more concealed ones are the ones clearing out any witnesses." Eunuch Lu frowned in thought. Su Qian remained silent, listening in. Since he was present at the meeting, those detained would be of little use now. Merely listening to the Ministry of Justice and magistrates talk was enough to learn what he needed. Lu Qingsheng spoke up, saying, "It's likely not just the Dali Temple and the Ministry of Rights. Even the Ministry of Works has spies. I've investigated their family backgrounds and social circles. With their capabilities alone, they couldn't have smuggled out so much gunpowder. So someone in the Ministry of Works must have helped them, and it must be someone of considerable rank. Gunpowder is a strategic resource that the court takes great care to protect. The anti-theft measures are thorough and stringent. Without a high-ranking official from the Ministry of Works, this couldn't have been done." The others nodded in agreement, acknowledging the logic. A eunuch by Lu Gonggong's side was busily taking notes, recording the discussions. It seemed these notes would be shown to the emperor. No wonder the Ministry of Justice were speaking so openly. The emperor's concern for this case far surpassed that of the tax silver case. Something from Sangbo was clearly very significant. What exactly was it? If not something terrifyingly dangerous, it must have been critical. Why else would it have been sealed beneath Sangbo? At this point, Eunuch Lu turned to Su Qian and said, "Lord Su, don't stay silent the whole time. As the lead investigator for the Night Watchers, do you have anything to report?" The Ministry of Justice officials thought the eunuch was trying to make things difficult for Su, the junior officer, and watched with amused anticipation. But to their surprise, Lord Chen Fuyin suddenly focused intently, slightly straightened his back, unexpectedly adopted a posture of listening attentively. Lu Qing whispered, "Forgotten already?" Su Qian was the one who solved the tax silver case. With her reminder, everyone in Chuya was enlightened. They all suddenly remembered Su Qian. No wonder the name sounded familiar earlier. Turns out, he was the one who saved the day in the tax silver case. And unwrapped wonder His Majesty personally appointed him as the lead officer of the Night Watchers. Su Qian didn't intend to speak up initially, but he noticed the little eunuch taking notes earlier. These notes would likely be presented to the emperor. So, even though sharing the information with these people seemed a bit wasteful, his contributions were now on record. With that in mind, Su Qian clasped his hands and said, "Indeed, I've made some progress. Regarding Lu Butu's conjecture, I have a few questions. I went to Sangpa for an inspection this morning. If someone wanted to blow up the entire Yongzhen Shanha temple, the amount of gunpowder required would be enormous." Lu Qing also investigated the scene at Sangpa. He asked doubtfully, "What's the problem with that?" Su Qian continued, "Here's the issue. You just mentioned that gunpowder is a highly strategic resource that the court values greatly. It's protected with strict secrecy and comprehensive anti-theft measures. Smuggling out this much gunpowder is incredibly difficult, not to mention erasing any traces. What kind of person do you think could pull this off?" Lu Qing hesitated for a moment. The Minister of Public Works, or the 2 vice ministers? Everyone was stunned. Even the little eunuch who was recording paused for a moment. Su Qian nodded. If it were the Minister of Public Works, or the 2 vice ministers, then it all makes sense. With their influence and capabilities, it wouldn't be impossible for them to bribe palace staff, or officials in the Supreme Court or Ministry of Justice. However, isn't this a bit foolish? Lu Qing frowned. "You mean," Qian continued, "smuggling gunpowder of this scale, no matter how cleanly it's done, won't escape scrutiny. I believe that someone who becomes a minister or vice minister wouldn't be this foolish. Lu Qing nodded. If it's not them, then apart from the Ministry of Public Works, where else could so much gunpowder come from? Su Qian replied. Could it be transported from outside the city? Let's set aside the outer city for now. The inner city requires a tax to bring goods in, and city guards inspect the cargo. As for the imperial city, it's even less likely. How could something as conspicuous as gunpowder be smuggled, unless what was transported were raw materials, not gunpowder itself? As Su Qian spoke, a flash of insight struck him. Among the raw materials for gunpowder, sulfur and charcoal aren't rare items, especially in winter. The amount of charcoal in the city is astonishing, but saltpeter is strictly controlled by Dafeng. He widened his eyes and stared at Lu Qing. Saltpeter mines? Lu Qing froze for a moment before realizing. Gold Spike Road? Saltpeter mines? On the other side, Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao exchanged glances, their expressions subtly shifting. The four of them had personally investigated Dahuang Mountain and discovered saltpeter mines there. Lu Qing calmed his initial shock. If it's truly the work of the demon race, then what about the 9 missing people? Su Qian replied slowly. It was to divert our attention and buy time to escape the capital. They made us think the gunpowder came from the Ministry of Public Works, implying that spies were planted within the court. This shifted the focus of the investigation to the Ministry of Public Works, the Ministry of Justice, and the Supreme Court. Eunuch Lu and the officials frowned, realizing they were beginning to lose track of the conversation. At this moment, Su Qian shook his head. But even with that, one question remains unanswered. How did they transport the gunpowder to Sangpa? Lu Qing replied. That's simple. The 9 missing laborers must have been either bought off or coerced. I leaned toward the former. Hearing this, Su Qian began brainstorming again. For the demon race to smuggle gunpowder into Sangpa, they must have had accomplices. Without insiders within the court, this would have been impossible. Let's not talk about the court insiders for now. Why does the demon race want to destroy Sangpa? To be precise, they are targeting the sealed object beneath Sangpa. What use does this sealed object have for them? At this moment, Lu Qing interrupted his thoughts. I noticed a detail earlier. Among the 9 missing people, 3 worked in the palace, 3 were from the Ministry of Rights, and 3 were from the Supreme Court. How did they hide this from their colleagues? To smuggle in the gunpowder? Su Qian had a thought. You're saying that 3 people alone couldn't have hidden this from their colleagues? Exactly. Why deliberately split up these 9 people? If all 9 were from the Ministry of Rights, the Supreme Court, or palace staff, it might still be possible. Lu Qing smiled sincerely, a rare, radiant expression. This was the aspect of Su Qian he admired most, his intelligence and ability to immediately grasp his point. Su Qian continued, so, there must be other people helping them. And this person must have the ability to freely enter the imperial city, or smuggle gunpowder into it. As he said this, Su Qian exchanged a glance with Lu Qing, recalling a certain case, the Jin Wuwei eunuch case. That case happened the day before the ancestral worship ceremony, and we personally handled it. Jin Wuwei was silenced. But before his death, he told his wife, he planned to take his family out of the capital. He was on duty when he died. Su Qian suddenly understood. The demon race forced laborers to mine saltpeter from Dahuang Mountain, make gunpowder, and blow up the Yongzhen Shanhe Temple, releasing the sealed object in Sangpa. The reason they used gunpowder was because the imperial palace's defenses are too tight for a direct assault. But gunpowder can do it. It just needs to be smuggled in discreetly. Whether it's the traitor in the Directorate of Celestial Observations, Ren Zong's female, national preceptor, or the high-ranking martial artists in the army, they can detect intrusions by powerful individuals, but they wouldn't be able to detect inanimate objects like gunpowder. Lu Han was just a minor eunuch. He didn't have the ability to smuggle gunpowder into... He was just a subordinate, and his superior, the envoy, was the one who killed him. Su Qian was truly speechless. Damn it. Demon race's schemes are endless. Like a sow wearing a bra, layer after layer. Their strategies were flawless, meticulous. Now, all they needed was to capture Lu Han's superior, Jin Wuwei, and interrogate him to uncover everything. Su Qian quickly identified a suspicious individual. Zhou Banheng. Clearing his throat, Su Qian said, Eunuch Lu and esteemed officials, I still have matters to attend to at the Ministry of Public Works. Please excuse me for now. He maintained a calm demeanor and spoke in a relaxed tone. Night watchers, follow me. The officials present weren't fools. Although Su Qian acted normal, his changing expressions during his conversation with Lu Qing and their discussion, even if they didn't fully understand, made it clear to them that Su Qian had discovered an important clue. Eunuch Lu urged him, Su Qian, have you discovered something? Is there progress on the case? Lu Qing, however, remained silent. Though he admired Su Qian, he reminded himself that they weren't particularly close. Not like he was a fiancé or something. Just delaying for some time was already a great gesture. At this moment, Minshan asked, Sir Su, where are we going now? Su Qian, without hesitation, replied directly, to capture the suspect. Yang Feng looked at Su Qian in confusion. Not quite understanding what was going on, Su Qian frowned. Why hasn't he returned yet? Does it take a whole morning to summon someone? Did he run into trouble? Shall we leave without him? Just as he was mounting his horse, at the Yamen gate, he saw a yellow flag rushing toward him. It was Li Yuchen and Chu Kaiwei in her light yellow dress. Li Yuchen explained, Miss Kaiwei hasn't been around for 4 days. She went into the palace. I waited at the Imperial City gates for a long time before she came out. Su Qian warmly greeted her, using the opportunity to show off his handsome face. Chu Kaiwei, with her round, oval face and sweet smile, was about to say something, but remembering her identity, and the night watchers watching nearby, she pursed her lips and huffed. At the market square, Su Qian got straight to the point. Min Ingluo, take my golden token, and go to the eastern gate of the Imperial City to capture Zhou Qixiang. The rest of you, follow me to Zhou's residence to arrest him. This arrangement made sense, because they weren't sure if Zhou Baihu was on duty today, so splitting into 2 groups was prudent. In the Imperial City, under the Emperor's watchful eye, conflicts were unlikely, as no one would dare to provoke one. But capturing someone wasn't as simple as saying it. You needed a permit to proceed. That's why sending Min Ingluo alone was enough. On the other hand, directly going to Zhou Baihu's residence might provoke a desperate fight. Since Su Qian had recently used the Heaven and Earth one-sword strike, his combat strength had significantly diminished, so he needed the assistance of 2 silver badges. Meanwhile, Lu Qing was reporting the situation. Eunuch Lu, esteemed officials, if my deductions are correct, the demon race is very likely involved in this matter. This statement caused the officials present to turn pale. A Ministry of Justice official, skeptical, asked, what evidence do you have? Lu Qing replied, a few days ago, I and Lord Su investigated the case in Taikang County, involving the demon race driving laborers to their deaths at Dahuang Mountain. At the year's end, a demon appeared in the river at the base of Dahuang Mountain, devouring hundreds of local laborers. Lord Su and I handled this case together, and at Dahuang Mountain, we discovered a completely excavated saltpeter mine. Lu Qing detailed the case of the Dahuang Mountain saltpeter mine, clearly to the officials present. It was an excellent way to buy time, because it wasn't just empty talk. The officials listened to no one rushed Lu Qing to continue. So, during my discussion with Lord Su earlier, we analyzed layer by layer, and found that the gunpowder might not have come from the Ministry of Public Works, but was connected to the saltpeter mine at Dahuang Mountain. The officials from the Ministry of Justice and the Yamen became serious. The demon race of the 9 provinces is divided into 2 major factions, the tribes of the northwest and the kingdom of 10,000 demons in the southern border. The kingdom of 10,000 demons in the south was destroyed long ago during the Jiazi War, leaving only remnants struggling to survive. The tribes of the northwest have formed an alliance with the northern tribes to resist Dafeng and the western countries. So, which demon faction is behind the saltpeter mine? Eunuch Lu glanced at the Yamen official. The latter nodded and said, this is indeed the case. Yamen received this case only recently. It was Lu Butu who handled it back then. Eunuch Lu's expression darkened. If the saltpeter mine had been discovered earlier, perhaps the chaos at Songpa and the demon incident at the year's end wouldn't have happened. Lu Qing was about to accuse the Taikang County magistrate of negligence and incompetence, but was stopped by a glance from the official. The official sighed. The demon race is powerful, and the Taikang County magistrate had limited means. Eunuch Lu snorted coldly. I will report this to His Majesty truthfully. Minister Sun glanced at Lu Qing and Su Qian. What are you 2 planning? He seemed to notice Lu Qing stalling for time, and cut straight to the point, not wanting to let him delay any longer. Eunuch Lu pondered aloud. Even if the demon race has gunpowder, how could they sneak it past Dafeng's military and city guards, and transport it into Songpa? Lu Qing smiled knowingly, and replied, good. I was just wondering how to stall for more time. Lu Qing clasped his hands and said, this involves another case. Everyone was shocked. Another case? The Songpa explosion case was tied to so many other events. Lu Qing continued. The day before His Majesty's ancestral worship ceremony, the eunuch Jin Wuwei and Lu Han died mysteriously at home. This case was also handled by me and Lord Su. At the time, Lord Su speculated that he had been silenced. However, this case had no overlap with the saltpeter mine case. We didn't connect the 2. Jin Wuwei, the minor eunuch, was silenced to smuggle gunpowder into Songpa. Everyone present was sharp, and without any doubts, the Ministry of Justice officials and some Yamen officers suddenly stood up from their chairs. That's Su, someone began, and Lu Qing interjected. Just now, Lord Su remembered this matter and pieced it all together. That's why he left in such a hurry. Minister Sun immediately ordered, quickly, issue an order to arrest all of Jin Wuwei's subordinates. In an instant, everyone stood up, rushing out of the assembly hall, not even caring if they overturned their chairs. The case had been analyzed to such a degree that it was crystal clear. Capturing the mole within Jin Wuwei would be a major accomplishment. Eunuch Lu extended his hand, and his attendant eunuch immediately handed him a booklet. Eunuch Lu carefully reviewed its contents. The first 2 pages detailed the cases from the Ministry of Justice and the Yamen, mostly filled with debates, dry and uninspiring. It wasn't until Su Qian joined that the case started to become clear and coherent. The speed of progress surprised Eunuch Liu. Under normal procedures, connecting the Dahuang Mountain saltpeter mine with the Eunuch case would have taken 2 or 3 days. This made it evident. His Majesty's decision to appoint Su Qian as the lead officer of the Night Watchers was a wise one. Eunuch Liu suddenly realized and said, Xiao Yunzi, starting today, you will stay at the Night Watchers Yamen to supervise their cases and report updates to me promptly. The little eunuch taking notes obeyed. At Zhou's residence, Song Tingfeng, following Su Qian's instructions, stepped onto the steps and knocked on the door loudly. An elderly voice came from inside. Baihu master is ill and cannot see anyone. Go back, there's nothing here. Song Tingfeng knocked on the door again. This time, the people inside pretended to be dead, offering no response. Song Tingfeng kicked the door hard. With a loud bang, the solid wooden door splintered instantly. Fragments flew everywhere. An old man in simple green clothing cowered in the distance, staring fearfully at the uninvited guests. Su Qian and Chu Kaiwei stayed behind, leaving 2 men to guard the entrance. The others followed Li Yinluo and Yang Yinluo inside. Chu Kaiwei glanced at Su Qian. You're the lead officer. Why don't you charge in? Su Qian smiled. During the Battle of Shanhai Pass, did you see His Majesty leading the charge? Chu Kaiwei was speechless. She knew he was spouting nonsense, but her not-so-quick mind couldn't think of a rebuttal. She pouted. I was going to give you a strength-boosting pill, but forget it. Su Qian was momentarily stunned by her words. Chu Kaiwei continued. Of course, it's just to replenish your energy and blood. You're so depleted. I can tell just by looking at your complexion. Su Qian elbowed her playfully. Give me one. I'll treat you to dinner tonight. At the mention of dinner, Chu Kaiwei perked up. She pulled out a porcelain bottle from her deerskin pouch and handed it to him. This should last you a while. Su Qian admired her generosity and confidence. As he walked inside, he shook a brown pill from the bottle into his hand and swallowed it. The pill had a strange taste. After chewing for a moment, a spicy heat spread through his mouth. Su Qian gulped it down quickly. Within seconds, a warm sensation spread through his stomach, making him feel very comfortable. The fatigue from earlier also eased significantly. Su Qian said, just to clarify, this is the side effect of a unique skill, not because I'm weak like Ruan Shower. Chu Kaiwei looked confused. Who's Ruan Shower? Su Qian replied, nothing good. At that moment, Li Yuchen and Yang Feng approached. They're gone. All the valuables in the residence have been moved. Song Tingfeng immediately grabbed the old doorman, pressing a knife to his neck and shouting, where? The trembling doorman stammered, Master Baihu. He left with his wife, son, and daughters to visit relatives outside the city. Song Tingfeng gritted his teeth. Then why did you say he was sick? The doorman replied, Master Baihu instructed me to say that, so I did. Su Qian asked, when did he leave? The doorman hesitated, pleading, the day the ancestral worship ceremony ended. What crime has Master Baihu committed? I know nothing about it. Su Qian gestured for Song Tingfeng to release him, then led the group back inside the residence. They searched room by room. Aside from some valuable antiques and paintings that were taken, everything else in the house was untouched. Li Yuchen said, Zhou Baihu has escaped. Su Qian glanced at Chu Kaiwei. It's too early to say that now. The oval-faced beauty somehow understood his meaning as if guided by intuition. She leaped lightly onto the rooftop, her bright, clear eyes scanning every corner of the Zhou residence. She wasn't searching for people, but for something else. Her focus was on the garden and the stone well. Moments later, Chu Kaiwei jumped down from the rooftop. There are no hidden bodies in the house, and no one has died here. Though it's possible something was concealed, using special methods. You could search every inch of the place if you want. Su Qian sighed. No need. Whether he's dead or has escaped, this lead is cut off. Most likely he fled. After all, the staff here saw Zhou Baihu leave with his family. As they walked out of the Zhou residence, Min Shan called out urgently. After the ancestral worship ceremony, Zhou Baihu took an extended leave. The colleagues looked gloomy, their hearts sinking. Chu Kaiwei glanced at Su Qian, feeling inexplicably worried for him. Su Qian muttered to himself, Zhou Baihu escaped. He left just an incense stick's time ago. Officials from the Ministry of Justice and the local government rode to the Zhou residence. They summoned the household staff for questioning. It was revealed that the patrol officers had just returned empty-handed. Zhou Baihu had already escaped the capital. This left the 2 government departments with mixed feelings. They were unsure what. Inside the palace, Eunuch Liu returned to the palace just before the city gates closed. With his son's help, he entered his quarters. He was about to sit down and rest for a while, when a young eunuch rushed in. He called out respectfully, Godfather. The emperor had sent someone to summon Eunuch Liu. Eunuch Liu, irritated, drank a cup of tea before replying, and told his son to prepare his formal attire. Just as he stepped over the threshold, he suddenly remembered something. Bring me the dossier, the one I brought back today. Shortly after, he arrived at the tranquil hall. After being announced, he was led inside. Emperor Yuanjing was holding a scroll and said, Lu Rong is pressing for progress on the case. It's been a whole day. What have you found? Eunuch Lu felt a chill in his heart. Having served in the palace for decades, he knew Emperor Yuanjing's temperament well. The emperor's calm demeanor only meant he was deeply agitated. Asking about the case was just a pretext. The emperor was about to vent his anger. Eunuch Lu quickly presented the dossier and said, Your Majesty, this is today's case summary. I was just about to present it to you. The emperor's personal chief eunuch stepped forward, took the dossier, and respectfully handed it to Emperor Yuanjing. The emperor took the dossier and began to read intently. As he read, his eyebrows started to rise. Emperor Yuanjing criticized sharply, Useless nonsense. The Ministry of Justice and the local government are becoming more incompetent. What about the Patrol Officers Department? Eunuch Lu lowered his head and replied, It's in the later section, Your Majesty. Emperor Yuanjing raised his eyebrows and resumed reading the dossier. As he read further, Emperor Yuanjing shifted from a reclining position to sitting upright. The two chief eunuchs unconsciously held their breaths, afraid to disturb the emperor or to provoke his anger. Eunuch Lu's forehead was already drenched in sweat. After a long while, Emperor Yuanjing, he commanded, order the Taikang County Magistrate to be removed from office. Send him to the vicinity of Mount Dawang. The casualties there number in the hundreds. Confine him to the dungeon. He is to be executed after next autumn. As for the constable Lu Qing, promote him to chief of the Six Gates Bureau. Hearing this, Eunuch Lu felt relief in his heart. The emperor didn't mention Su Qian, because Su Qian was already under suspicion. His performance would be judged last. His reward would be his life. Eunuch Lu felt a weight lifted off his shoulders. He accepted the orders and left the tranquil hall. He returned to his quarters silently with a young eunuch, finally letting out a long sigh of relief. Judging by the emperor's tone, the rest of the content must have satisfied him. It seemed the emperor's gloomy mood stemmed from something else. In the tranquil hall, Emperor Yuanjing stood by the window in silence for a long time. He finally ordered the lifting of the curfew within and outside the city. His two personal eunuchs quickly bowed and left to carry out the order. Su Qian returned to his residence, utterly exhausted. Seeing his return, Su Pingji ordered the kitchen to reheat the dishes and serve them. Soon, the cooks brought out the reheated food. Su Qian looked at his rugged second uncle and his handsome younger cousin, feeling a moment of daze. Noticing his nephew's state, Su Pingji asked with concern, Ningyan, what's wrong? Su Qian removed his hat and said softly, It's nothing. I just suddenly feel like drinking. In this world, he was all alone. No phone, no computer, no internet trolls, and certainly no Japanese romance films. Every day, he lived by the light of candles or oil lamps, grumbling even when going to the toilet, having to lift his robes high. Sometimes, he dreamt of returning to his previous life, waking up with a smile, only to stare blankly at the crisscrossing wooden beams of the ceiling. Su Qian drank one cup of wine after another, not because he missed his past life, but because he suddenly recalled a phrase. A restless heart finds no peace. Life is without fragrance. In this world, there's always someone waiting for you to come home at night, keeping your meals warm in the kitchen. No matter how tired, helpless, or lonely you feel outside, coming back here reminds you, you're not alone. After finishing his meal, Su Qian exhaled deeply. Sambua was bombed. The emperor ordered me to investigate this case thoroughly, to redeem myself through merit. Su Pingji nodded slowly. I know, but this is not something you can get involved in. Su Qian sighed helplessly. I know. My job is just to investigate, not to apprehend anyone, but I have to try, or I'll have no choice but to flee. This shouldn't implicate you all. After all, I haven't committed a major crime. Under the table, Su Qian's hands were clenched so tightly they creaked. He had never thought about paying the price in Huangquan. If the case couldn't be solved, running would be inevitable. However, he had finally found a home where he felt a sense of belonging, but now he might have to say goodbye to it for good in the near future. Su Qian's crime was resisting and attacking a superior. Although it was a capital crime, it was far from implicating his family. In Dafeng, collective punishment was a very severe punishment. Ordinary people didn't even qualify for it. To reach the level of destroying entire clans, one had to meet the following criteria. First, treason. Second, causing significant losses to the nation. Third, causing significant losses to the royal family. And lastly, betting on the wrong side. Previously, Su Pingji's case fell under the second criterion, losing tax silver, which caused significant damage to the national treasury. But that was not the norm. Those who managed to fulfill all four conditions were usually the high-ranking officials in the court, the prominent nobles. These were the ones who were often subjected to entire clan executions. Therefore, collective punishment was jokingly referred to as a privilege of the elites. As for Su Qian, he was at most a death row convict. If he fled, he would simply become a fugitive. It wouldn't implicate his uncle and aunt. Second uncle Su nodded in satisfaction. It's good that you've figured it out. You've been stubborn since childhood. Su Qian sighed helplessly. That was the old me. The current me is much more adaptable. Second brother Su also let out a sigh of relief. If worst comes to worst, you can go to Yunzhou. Su Qian was taken aback. Yunzhou? That place is plagued with bandits. It's also called Bandit Province. Second brother is in Yunzhou too. Second brother Su said, yes, the bandit problem is serious there. The imperial court's influence is weakest there. Even if you're wanted, it'll be safer for you there. If you harden your heart, you could even become a bandit yourself. You'd gain power and authority while honing your martial arts. Many fugitives wanted by the court, along with outlaws from the Jianghu, like to gather in Yunzhou. Su Qian thought deeply. That makes sense. Compared to other places, hiding in Yunzhou would be safer. The more chaotic the place, the safer it is. Suddenly, a thought flashed in his mind. If I were Zhou Baihu, where would I escape to? The Yao clan orchestrated the bombing of Manhwa, perfectly ensuring the execution of his entire clan, and the severe punishment of 3 families. Nowhere would be safe to hide. There are only 2 options: leave Dafeng or hide in Yunzhou. Su Qian excitedly patted his younger cousin's shoulder, only to hear second uncle Su angrily scold. You're not going to Yunzhou? Su Qian was surprised by his uncle's reaction. Why not? Second uncle Su angrily replied. What are you going to Yunzhou for? To become a bandit? The court cracks down on bandits every year. What if they send you there to suppress bandits in the future? Have you forgotten the promise you two made that day? The 2 brothers exchanged a look. What promise? Su Qian suddenly remembered. He hadn't expected that a casual promise made back then with Su Xinyan would resurface now. Neither of them took it seriously, but second uncle still remembered it. It seems he truly kept it in his heart. Su Qian chuckled. Got it. I won't go to Yunzhou. I'll head to the western regions instead. The women there are both beautiful and passionate. At that moment, Su Lingyue came in holding a steaming bowl of milk. Big brother, have some milk to replenish your second uncle added. This was personally bought fresh today by Lin Yu at the market. It's today's midday milk. Su Xinyan joked. Lin Yin drank 2 big bowls of it and got beaten up by his sister. Su Qian took the milk, sniffed it, and almost gagged. Milk in this era was like this, pure, with no additives whatsoever, authentic and unaltered. At most, it was heated and sterilized, but it was both gamey and pungent, really unpleasant to drink. Did I maybe try improving the milk? And then use a secret formula to make a Never mind. I don't even know how to remove this taste. The teachers in school never taught us that. He recalled that in middle school, his parents had ordered milk for him. Su Qian himself never drank it. Every day, he'd tuck it in his pocket and give it to the girl he liked. He thought that was love. Growing up, he realized that girl was drinking someone else's premium milk. At some point, it started raining desolately outside. The rain soaked the withered branches and the stone slabs in the courtyard. With a full stomach, Su Qian held an oil paper umbrella and returned to his small courtyard. He lit an oil lamp, opened the window, and looked out into the fully darkened sky. In the peach blossoms of spring, a cup of wine. In the Jianghu's night rain, 10 years of lamps. When the poet Huang Tingjian wrote this poem, he must have felt the same way Su Qian did. Both of them were missing certain people in their hearts, perhaps also in a moment of such silence. On this cold, stormy night, Su Qian didn't know how much time had passed before he finally forced himself out of his melancholic state. A person cannot always stay lost in their own world. There's still much to be done. Su Qian took out his jade talisman and sent a message. There's been another incident in the capital. The first to respond was number 2. Emperor Yuanjing was assassinated. Su Qian felt a headache coming on. What's wrong with you, little brother? You can't stop bringing up Emperor Yuanjing ascending to heaven. Did he eat your family's rice? Or steal your family's silver? Jin Lian chimed in. Yesterday, the inner and outer cities were sealed off. No civilians were allowed to enter or leave. I figured something must have happened. Number 1, who always enjoyed showing off, immediately jumped in. Manhwa was bombed. The Eternal Mountain River Temple was destroyed. The sealed artifact beneath Manhwa is missing. Number 2 exclaimed. What did you say? Manhwa was bombed? The Eternal Mountain River Temple was destroyed? Number 1, are you joking with us? Number 4 added. Number 3, is this what you wanted to say? Su Qian calmly replied. Yes, Manhwa was destroyed. The Eternal Mountain River Temple is gone, and the artifact sealed beneath it is missing. Jin Lian was shocked. That's unbelievable. Are there any leads on this? Number 1 replied before anyone else, and Su Qian immediately sensed something unusual. Interesting. Daoist Jin Lian, why didn't you ask me, a patrol officer, but instead directly question number 1? Does this mean you believe that in high-level secrets like this, number 1 is more likely to have the relevant clues than I am? Number 1 responded. This case has been handed over to the Patrol Bureau, the Ministry of Justice, and the local government to handle together. I don't know the specifics. The group chat participants were visibly disappointed. If even number 1, who holds a high position in the court, doesn't know the details, then number 3 surely wouldn't know either. At this moment, Su Qian spoke up. Well, isn't that convenient? Our academy, through certain channels, has actually uncovered a lot of secrets. We've roughly pieced together the case's outline. Everyone in the group was shocked. Number 3 actually knows something? Number 5 asked. Number 3, your academy seems to have a deep reach. Even things number 1 doesn't know, your academy knows? By the way, what's your position at the academy? Su Qian replied calmly. I have my own methods, of course. Su Qian knew the importance of leaving things. The smarter someone is, the more they overthink. They would doubt number 3's claim of being just an ordinary student, or even suspect number 3 of having another identity. In the absence of solid evidence, their thoughts would only grow more chaotic, except for number 1, who was hard to fool. But there were no conflicts between him and number 1 for now. Besides, he was beginning to piece together number 1's identity. At least he could narrow it down to a range. Su Qian continued typing. So, what are you willing to trade for my information? Seeing this message, everyone in the group felt an odd sense of unease, a strange feeling of mounting debts. Number 4 sighed and replied, I've been too focused on training recently and haven't gotten any valuable information. I'll owe you for now. Number 2 also hesitated. I've been busy dealing with bandits. Once I figure out who's manipulating the various camps in Yunzhou, I'll repay my debt to number 3. Number 5 said, I do have some important information recently, but sharing it would reveal my identity. Number 4 immediately replied mockingly, You're from Southern Border, aren't you? Number 1 joined in, adding, Probably a noble from one of the ancient clans. Number 2 delivered the final blow, maybe even someone with some rank in combat. Number 5 started to panic. You all know already? Su Qian was speechless. Isn't it obvious? You know the history of the 10,000 Demon Kingdom like the back of your hand, and keep calling yourself this lady. Besides, you yourself revealed earlier that your father holds a high position. Su Qian silently evaluated number 5, thinking, she doesn't seem too bright. She's on the same level as my carefree Kaiwei. He redefined the personalities of the group chat members. Number 1 holds a high position in the court, and is a perfectionist. Number 2 is an idealistic rebel, but very clever. He was the one who tested him during the ancestral worship ceremony. Number 1, number 4, and Daoist Song have friendly ties, and have visited the court before, but now they wander the world. Number 5 is a girl, from the ancient clans of Southern Border, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Number 6 is like Dafeng's version of Lu Jishan, with profound cultivation. Number 7 is on the run. A piece of the Earth Book is in number 2's hands, and number 2 and number 7 share a special bond. Number 8 is in closed-door cultivation, and has been silent for a long time. Number 9 is the founder of the Heaven and Earth Society, and the cunning old Taoist Jin Lian. Number 5 fell silent for a while before saying, Fine, this lady is from the ancient clans of Southern Border. I'll admit it openly and proudly. I have important news to share. An ancient god has begun to awaken. Su Qian was startled. Ancient gods are beings beyond classification, the originators of the ancient art system. Number 5 continued, Yesterday, a trace of divine aura emerged from the gathering garden. All the low-level goo in the village exploded, and the high-level goo went berserk, attacking the clansmen. Even my natal goo almost lost control. My father said that after thousands of years, the goo god is finally awakening. But this is not a good thing. Number 2 asked, Why isn't it good? Number 5 explained, The goo god is the source of chaos. Devouring and reproduction are ingrained in its instincts. If it fully awakens, all life in Southern Border will become its targets for mating and devouring. It will turn all of the 9 provinces into a world ruled solely by goo. So, our ancient clan is gathering strong warriors, and planning to infiltrate the gathering garden in a few days to investigate the situation. Su Qian was startled. There's such a thing as this? The goo god is truly such a creature? Jin Lian replied, This is indeed shocking news. Su Qian asked, Taoist, is the reason for the goo god's slumber also due to a seal? Jin Lian replied, I don't know. The era of the goo god's existence is too ancient. He existed before humans learned to write. You could ask number 5. But just the fact that the goo god is awakening likely outweighs the value of your Sambwa case. Su Qian was indignant. Outweighs the value of my Sambwa case? Number 5 chuckled. Number 3, if you want to know more about the goo god, you could trade with me. What do you want? My brother isn't married yet. I've heard that the Northern Princess is the most beautiful woman in the world. I want her to be my sister-in-law. Su Qian thought to himself, What kind of nonsense are you spouting? If I had that kind of ability, I'd marry her myself. Why would I give her to your brother? Su Qian replied, One princess isn't enough. We also have a princess, a national beauty, and the grandmaster of our court. I'll package them all together and send them to you. Number 5, being simple-minded, laughed happily. Great, great. Number 1 interrupted, breaking the conversation. If it's just this nonsense, I'm going to rest now. Please keep the conversation meaningful. Number 5 stopped joking, because she also wanted to know about the Sambwa case. She sent a message, All I know is that the goo god is the source of the goo system, the origin of all goo in the world. Other than that, I'm not sure. Su Qian organized his thoughts and began sharing what he knew about the Sambwa case. The sealed artifact beneath Sanhwa might be related to the Yao clan. At present, the Dafeng authorities have preliminarily confirmed this. The force behind the bombing of Sanhwa is most likely the Yao tribe, but it's unclear whether it's from the northern Yao tribe or the 10,000 Demon Kingdom. Everyone in the Heaven and Earth Society was puzzled. How is this connected to the Yao tribe again? Why would the Yao tribe want to destroy the seal under Sanhwa? What's sealed there? The hidden truth behind the Sanhwa case is definitely not simple. To unravel it all, it's necessary to figure out what exactly was sealed beneath Sanhwa. Su Qian shared this information without worrying about leaking inside knowledge or arousing speculation about his identity among the Heaven and Earth Society members. Because there were many officials present during the meeting in the conference hall, and the Academy could have obtained the information through channels unrelated to the Patrol Bureau. Number 1 objected. That's impossible. Sanhwa's defenses are airtight. Even a high-ranking expert wouldn't be able to infiltrate. How did the Yao tribe destroy Sanhwa? And where would they get the explosives? Su Qian replied, the court has already figured this out. Traces of Shao clan minerals were found in Mount Dahuang within Taikang County, but the deposits have been fully mined. The miners were identified as Yao tribe members. Number 1. Your intelligence channels are lacking. Additionally, the spy collaborating with the Yao tribe has been identified. It's Zhou Qixiang, a centurion under Jin Wu Wei, but he fled with his family. Number 1 asked skeptically, then this lead is a dead end? Su Qian chuckled. Not necessarily. The court will definitely issue a wanted notice soon. Zhou Qixiang will either leave Dafeng or hide in a safe place. Where do you think he'll hide? Number 2 quickly answered. Do we even need to ask? It's definitely Yunzhou. Su Qian smirked cunningly. When it comes to Yunzhou, no one in the Heaven and Earth Society knows more than number 2. At this point, his goal was achieved. He had brought up the topic deliberately to get number 2 to help him keep an eye on Yunzhou. Let's see if we can reach the top 5 on the weekly leaderboard. But according to my persona, I shouldn't feel so sad about a fugitive. Number 1 said, Number 2, you have some influence in Yunzhou. Can you keep an eye out for Zhou Qixiang? Su Qian was thrilled. Well done. In number 1's mind, number 2 seemed more reliable than the authorities. But number 2 coldly refused. I refuse to help you. Number 1 said. The group chat fell into a brief silence. Number 1 and number 2 didn't seem to get along. No one else tried to mediate, likely because before those two had already had conflicts. This won't do. If number 2 won't help, Yunzhou is so vast. How can we track down Zhou Qixiang? I'll have to step in. This way I can do number 1 a favor, and also collect the debt from number 2. Su Qian typed. Number 2, please keep an eye on Zhou Qixiang. Consider it paying back your last debt. As for number 1, sorry, but you owe me another favor. What do you both think? Reluctantly, number 2 replied, fine, I'll give you this one. I'll keep an eye out. I still have some clout in Yunzhou, so finding someone isn't hard. As long as Zhou Qixiang is in Yunzhou, I can track him down. With number 2 sounding so confident, Su Qian grew more certain number 2 wasn't with the government. Yunzhou was rife with banditry. They left their names everywhere, challenging the authorities. If number 2 were a government official, they wouldn't make such bold claims. Not being part of the government yet so keen on suppressing bandits, number 2 must have a righteous heart. A moment later, number 1 replied, sure. Everyone in the group breathed a sigh of relief. The deal was done. The conflict was resolved. Number 3 truly lived up to being a scholar. Normally, number 1 and number 2 would have gotten into a fight by now. Taoist Jinlian brought number 3 into the Heaven and Earth Society. Indeed, it was a wise move. Since number 3 joined the Heaven and Earth Society, the group chat has become much more active. The frequency of message exchanges has increased. For everyone, this was a very welcome development. Number 4 said, so why did the demons target the sealed object beneath Sambu Lake? It must have been the northern demons who did it. Historically, they haven't clashed much with the southern demon kingdom. Su Qian thought to himself, the northern demons and Dafeng are mortal enemies, while the southern demon kingdom is at endless odds with the western Buddhist sections. Spring Brother once mentioned that the northern tribes and the northern demons frequently harassed the borderlands. It seems they might be preparing for another war. So, the northern demon makes sense. Number 5 asked, so what exactly is sealed beneath Sambu Lake that the northern demons have been plotting for so long? Su Qian mentally teased, little sister, you have so many questions. Uncle can't answer them for you, because Uncle also wants to know. Taoist Jinlian said, regardless, it must be something that gives Dafeng a huge headache. Hopefully it won't endanger the ordinary people of the capital. Taking the opportunity, Su Qian sent a message. The supervisor of the Directorate of Celestials is ill. What's your take on that? The Yunlu Academy obtained confidential information. There is indeed a formation beneath Sambu Lake. I suspect it's the work of Si Tianjian. Number 2 immediately refuted. That's impossible. A grade 1 expert can't get sick. Number 5 chimed in. A grade 1 expert stands at the pinnacle of the world. They can't get sick, especially not someone from the warlock system. Su Qian remained silent, pondering. Number 4 was a smart person, because his thoughts were similar to mine. The supervisor doesn't want to get involved in this matter. What's with this ambiguous attitude? Shouldn't he be protecting the capital? Number 1 said, I can repay part of my debt right now. The information about Sambu might not. Number 3, do you want to hear it? Su Qian felt annoyed. Not very valuable. Yet you want to repay your previous debt with it? This number 1 is going too far. Turning the tables. I can't just let you take advantage of me. Since the lead through Zhou Baihu is broken, I'll have to find another breakthrough. Su Qian responded indifferently. Go ahead. Let's hear it. A moment later, number 1 slowly said, I looked into the records about Sambu. I found a very conspicuous event. Maybe the thing sealed beneath Sambu is related to this. About 500 years ago, the crown prince fell into Sambu Lake while boating and became mentally unstable afterward. Not long after, he drowned in the lake. But there's another major event from 500 years ago. It's only briefly mentioned in the history books. There's a deliberate vagueness in the official records. I'm sure number 3 remembers. Su Qian was frustrated. Why isn't there a Baidu here? I don't remember anything. I haven't even read any history books. Number 4 unexpectedly chimed in. Could it be a coup? 500 years ago, Defeng had a rebellion. The leader was Prince Pinghai, who later became Emperor Wuzong. Although Wuzong tried to cover up his usurpation with the guise of a righteous campaign, it was ultimately a shameful affair. Historians dared only hint at it, writing that during the Tianqing era, demons ran rampant. Wuzong rose in the east to quell the chaos. The current ruling family of Defeng are all descendants of Wuzong. Number 5 asked, so what does this have to do with Sambu? Su Qian, seeing her comment, thought to himself, geez, this girl really isn't very bright. Number 2 said, Number 1, are you suggesting the sealed object in the eternal stabilizing shrine has something to do with the royal family from 500 years ago? Number 1 countered, don't you find it strange that the supervisor is feigning illness? Su Qian took a sharp breath, sitting up straighter. Beneath Sambu, something connected to the royal family from 500 years ago is sealed. It's linked to the history of usurpation, a taboo the royal family refuses to discuss. Only the top figures of the court know about it. So, the prince's death 500 years ago was no coincidence. It was revenge. Since it was a family affair, a matter within the royal household, the supervisor deliberately feigned illness to avoid involvement. The northern demons stirred up this matter to plunge the capital into chaos and potentially destabilize the court. They want to use the turmoil as an opportunity for their schemes in the north. The Sambu case runs deeper than expected. Maybe I should just run away. It feels like fleeing is less risky than getting involved in this case. Su Qian said, oh right, I forgot something. The seal beneath Sambu has some inscriptions. They're quite interesting. I think I should share them with you. This is free. He didn't ask anyone. What script is this? That would be foolish. What if it was just an ancient script? That would reveal his low level of education. It would ruin his scholarly cover from Yunlua. Su Qian wrote 2 twisted characters on the mirrored surface of the jade pathway. Jinlian glanced at them and said, that's Buddhist script. Su Qian froze for a moment. Buddhist script? Number 5 asked, why would Buddhist script appear on Sambu's ceiling formation? Number 4 said, that shouldn't be the case. Something so secretive involving the royal family wouldn't involve Buddhist monks. The others all expressed their confusion. After a long wait, no one spoke up. Everyone had their own guesses. Su Qian asked, haven't seen number 6 speaking recently? Jinlian replied, it seems number 6 encountered some trouble and left the East City Health Hall days ago. I'll handle tracking him down. Su Qian joked, is that bald guy cursed? Why does he always run into trouble? After waiting a while longer, Su Qian finally realized everyone in the chat had gone offline. What a rude bunch. Lying on his bed, staring at the dark ceiling, he let his thoughts churn. If what's sealed under Sambu is a former royal powerhouse, that could be a huge problem. Knowing such a secret, I'll probably get executed, right? If the truth comes out publicly, however, I won't have to worry about being silenced by the directorate. Wei Yuan once said, the task of tracking down the sealed object was given to others. I don't need to get involved. My task is probably to find the traitor in the Sambu case. Wait, when discussing the case earlier today with Lu Qing in the council chamber, we concluded that the 9 missing individuals couldn't have secretly smuggled gunpowder into the eternal stabilizing shrine, and Zhou Baihu is just Jin Wuwei. Jin Wuwei is only in charge of guarding the shrine, not the ancestor ceremony. In other words, he didn't even have the opportunity to enter the shrine. Zhou Baihu isn't the mastermind. Jin Wuwei's Zhou Baihu is just one piece of the puzzle, responsible for delivering the gunpowder to the palace. Others were responsible for hiding it in the eternal stabilizing shrine. There's a higher level manipulator behind him. This mastermind, working with the demons, orchestrated the Sambu case and released the sealed object from the eternal stabilizing shrine. Su Qian sat up abruptly, clenching his fist in excitement. My true task is to uncover this mastermind. Meanwhile, the civil and military officials waiting outside the Meridian Gate gathered in small groups, chatting about mundane matters. His Majesty has been attending court more frequently lately, someone noted. Is he in a rush? He wasn't this diligent last year. It's naturally because of Sambu's unrest. Today, His Majesty is going to lose his temper. Officials raise their eyebrows. Well, I'm just a civil official. The Sambu issue has nothing to do with me. They exchanged knowing smiles. Then who is it related to? To whom? Obviously, to the Jin City Guards, specifically, those responsible for guarding the capital, and to the Royal Night Patrol, which, of course, means it's tied to the Night Patrol's leader, Wei Yuan. Exactly. Wei Qingyi. Wei Yuan is a unique individual. There isn't a eunuch with more power than him in the current dynasty. Even the emperor's chief eunuch doesn't have as much authority. Only Wei Yuan is different. He's not only the leader of the Night Patrol, he's also the chief censor of the Office of Inspectors. These two offices have the power to supervise all officials. The meaning is clear. Wei Yuan is the emperor's blade. Whoever disobeys, the blade will fall on their neck. Now that the eternal stabilizing shrine has been destroyed, the emperor is finally attending court after a long absence. Clearly, he's full of anger and ready to vent it, and Wei Yuan is bound to bear the brunt. The officials are happy to watch the drama unfold. When the memorials were presented, the Ministry of Justice stepped forward, saying loudly, "Last night, thieves broke into Sambu, blowing up the eternal stabilizing shrine. This is a disgrace to our great nation. Wei Yuan, as the leader of the Night Patrol, guardian of the imperial city, should be executed immediately to appease the public." At once, a chorus of career critics jumped in, calling for Wei Yuan's head. The atmosphere in court turned into a marketplace. As usual, people exaggerated, demanding executions and confiscations. It didn't matter how big the issue was. Off with his head, they said. If the emperor disagreed, they would haggle, lowering it from execution to exile, from exile to dismissal. But they can't outright call for dismissal. They need to give the emperor room to negotiate. Otherwise, the emperor might see it as, if you're not giving me room to bargain, then no punishment at all. The Emperor Yuanjing remained unruffled. The destruction of the eternal stabilizing shrine did reveal some failures of the Night Patrol office, so they did bear some responsibility. However, he acknowledged that the Night Patrol office has consistently safeguarded the imperial household. Wei Yuan, you've done well. The officials began murmuring amongst themselves. What's going on? His Majesty actually dismissed our criticisms of Wei Yuan and even praised him. How bold of Wei Yuan. At this point, the emperor's chief eunuch snapped his whip, sharply warning the officials to remain quiet. The officials, though seething with frustration, knew they couldn't just let Wei Yuan off so easily. One of them stepped forward. Su Qian killed a guard outside the Ministry of Justice, showing blatant disrespect for imperial authority. I respectfully request His Majesty to severely punish him, even executing his entire household. Wei Yuan calmly stepped forward, saying, Your Majesty, the Ministry of Justice instructed its guards to obstruct Night Patrol investigations with malicious intent. I suspect Minister Sun of the Ministry of Justice of colluding with the culprits who destroyed Sambu. I request that he be dismissed and imprisoned in the imperial jail so that I can interrogate him. Both sides immediately began trading accusations. Officials from various factions occasionally chimed in, fueling the heated arguments. The hall became a scene of intense factional struggle. After a long while, the Emperor Yuanjing, seeing that the arguments had run their course, instructed his chief eunuch to restore order and silence the Golden Pavilion. Gong Luo, Su Qian has indeed committed offenses, and his actions have been extreme. All officials must work together on investigations, rather than obstructing one another. If this happens again, I will not hesitate to impose severe punishments. Wei Yuan's expression briefly flickered with surprise. He had anticipated that Su Qian would be fine, but he hadn't expected Emperor Yuanjing to personally speak up for that little constable. Emperor Yuanjing swept a sharp gaze over the officials and continued, From today onwards, the city gates will no longer be sealed. However, all officials of 6th rank and above are forbidden from leaving the capital. At the Su residence, second uncle Su said to Su Qian, Go wake up Ling Yin. She's had this lazy habit since she was young. It'll be hard to change it now that she's grown. Su Qian suspected his uncle just wanted more people at the breakfast table. As winter crept in, his aunt and Lin Yu hadn't gotten up yet, both staying cozy under their blankets. Second brother Su's teacher hadn't arrived and had returned to Yunlu Academy. Su Qian promptly headed to the inner courtyard, knocked on Su Lingyin's door, and was greeted by her maid. The maid looked at him with a mix of expectation, caution, and shyness, saying, What does the young master want? Su Qian replied, I'm here to wake Lingyin up. He stepped into the room. There he saw Su Lingyin curled up in her thick blankets. Su Qian gave her a playful slap on her backside, waking her up. The little girl groggily opened her eyes and mumbled incoherently, Big pot. Before falling back asleep, Su Qian was both amused and exasperated. Looks like it's time for drastic measures. He started reciting the breakfast menu. Steamed lamb, steamed bear paws, steamed deer tails, roasted ducks, roasted chicks, roasted geese, braised pork, braised duck, soy sauce chicken. The little girl immediately jumped up, though her brain was still half asleep. Her body couldn't wait to go eat breakfast. Su Qian carried her to the front hall. The little girl rested her head on Su Qian's shoulder, her little backside sticking out as she dozed off again. Arriving at the front hall, the little girl stared wide-eyed at the table of steamed buns, soy milk, and fried dough sticks. She looked like she was about to cry from disappointment. This isn't the breakfast I want. Where's my steamed lamb, steamed bear paws, and steamed deer tail roasted duck? Su Qian rolled his eyes. You actually remembered all that? The little one wailed and started crying, lifting his chin and assaulting Su Qian with sound waves. Meanwhile, at the Imperial City, Wei Yuan left the Golden Pavilion. A voice called out from behind. Lord Wei, wait. Wei Yuan, before his rise to power, used to work in the palace. He had a close friendship with Chief Eunuch Liu. He smiled. What can I do for you, Eunuch Liu? Eunuch Liu pulled a few sheets of official paper from his sleeve and handed them to Wei Yuan. Lord Wei, please have a look at these. Wei Yuan understood, nodding with a smile. Next time I'm in the palace, I'll treat you to a few drinks. Leaving through the southern gate, he got into his carriage. The driver, Yang Yin, silently directed the carriage toward the office. Wei Yuan took out the papers and read them for a while. Before each court session, he would rehearse the court proceedings in his mind, then review them afterward. This time, Wei Yuan was right. The Sambu case indeed became a pretext for the opposition to attack. What he hadn't expected was how easily the matter was brushed aside. Nangong Chinro curiously asked, What are you looking at, foster father? Wei Yuan chuckled. I thought I'd be scolded by His Majesty today, but I managed to pass without issue. Yang Yin asked in surprise. Nangong Chinro grinned. Nobody used this opportunity to target the office? Wei Yuan smiled as he held the crumpled papers. The documents contained analyses of the case, from various officials of the Ministry of Justice and the local offices. There wasn't much value in them, until he reached the section that recorded Su Qian's findings. The mine of the Shao clan in Dawangshan. A minor official silenced. Jin Wuwei colluding with the demons. The threads of the Sambu case suddenly became clear. Wei Yuan smiled and said, That brat is quite the talented investigator. Yang Yan's voice came from outside the carriage. Keep an eye on Su Qian. Nangong Chinro laughed. You're quite lucky. That's a promising talent you've picked up. Meanwhile, over in the archives, Su Qian was poring over documents. Just as number 1 had mentioned, 500 years ago there really had been an emperor who usurped the throne. However, aside from that, the historical records of the royal family from 500 years ago were sparse. Other than the founding emperor of the Great Song dynasty, the details of other members were vague and likely erased. Only their names remained. But one thing was certain. The figure sealed under Sambu wasn't the deposed emperor who had his throne usurped. It's well known that before the Qi refining realm, karma doesn't manifest. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's just that the time hasn't come. And according to the records, the deposed emperor had children by age 14, so it couldn't have been him. At this moment, Su Qian said, Find me any third rank or higher expert from 500 years ago. Don't leave out anyone. Having said that, Su Qian reached for a fried fishball, only for it to be swiftly swatted away by Gu Danlian. Lady Kaiwei, Su Qian said, I just remembered something. Coughing lightly, he added, How are those fried fish balls? Chu Kaiwei nodded. Delicious. Su Qian followed up, I'd like some, but not that. Chu Kaiwei asked in confusion, Then what do you want? With a warm smile, Su Qian replied, I just want to gaze at you. Chu Kaiwei blushed, her heart skipping a beat. She hesitated, wanting to scold him, but the words seemed more ambiguous than crude. It wasn't quite the lewd talk of a scoundrel. For a moment, she wasn't sure if she should be angry. Su Qian smartly changed the topic. Lady Kaiwei, I have something to ask. Is there any way to block the Heavenly Supervisor's detection? Chu Kaiwei replied. High-level experts can suppress their own auras, but it's all relative. I'm a 7th-rank feng shui master, so only a very high-rank cultivator can elude my detection. It'd take at least a 5th or 6th rank to pull that off. Su Qian wiped his hands nervously. I'm only an 8th-rank Qi practitioner, so to hide from my detection, Zhou Baihu would have to be at the copper skin and iron bone stage, but he clearly wasn't. Thinking of this, he pressed further. What about other options? Chu Kaiwei explained. Then it would have to be a magical artifact. There are 2 types of magical artifacts in this world. One is made by our 4 heavens supervisors, crafted using official spells and runes. The other comes by chance, items imbued with divine energy through serendipity. The latter can vary greatly. For example, a 1,000-year-old tree struck by lightning might retain traces of that lightning's power, or an object carried by a high-ranking expert, for many years, nurtured by their aura, could develop its own spiritual properties. However, this kind is usually an extension of the expert's ability. Su Qian got straight to the point. Is there any artifact in the capital that can block auras? Chu Kaiwei tilted her head thoughtfully. Our 4 heavens supervisors have some, but I'd have to ask Senior Brother Song about other sources. Su Qian nodded. All right, I'll leave this matter to you. At that moment, a a female official walked in. Sir Su, we've compiled a list of individuals from 500 years ago, suspected of being high-ranking practitioners. Su Qian gave the list a quick glance. The official records didn't explicitly state someone's rank. No Grandmaster labels. Instead, they inferred rankings based on the achievements of generals documented in the official histories. For example, the Northern Warden, who guarded the Northern Front for decades, surviving hundreds of battles. There was no doubt he must have been a high-ranking practitioner. Most of the names on the list were 4th or 5th rank. There were only a handful of 3rd rankers, and no 2nd rankers, let alone 1st rankers. Whoever was sealed in Sambu must have been at least 2nd rank. Otherwise, a few mid-rank officials could have easily dealt with the threat, making a seal unnecessary. Was my reasoning wrong? Could it be that what's sealed isn't a person, but an artifact? Wait, the supervisor. Su Qian felt a chill run through him. His breath quickened involuntarily. The supervisor's role is to stand guard over the capital, the guardian deity of Defeng. At least, that's how it is with this generation of supervisors. So when Emperor Wu wanted to seize the throne back then, he must have had to deal with the supervisor first. A bold speculation formed in Su Qian's mind, sending a shiver down his spine. Suppressing his trembling voice, Su Qian asked, Kaiwei, is our master the 1st-generation supervisor? Chu Caiwei's answer made Su Qian's blood boil. No, master is the 2nd-generation supervisor. Su Qian swallowed hard. Then how did the 1st-generation supervisor die? Chu Caiwei shook her head. I don't know. Master never talks about the founder. Su Qian's conjecture sent shivers down his spine. No wonder only Emperor Yuanjing knew about this secret. No wonder the supervisor fell ill. No wonder the northern demons staged this elaborate plot. It was the 1st-generation supervisor. What's sealed beneath Sambu must be the 1st-generation supervisor. Su Qian felt his hair stand on end at the thought. If the 1st-generation supervisor is free, chaos will erupt in the capital. At that moment, Su Qian actually considered fleeing the capital. Escape. Run as fast as possible. Take Uncle and Annie with me. If the 1st-generation supervisor escapes, it will cause bloodshed. That's a 1st-rank expert. After all, when that happens, the entire capital will turn into a battlefield. But thinking further, Su Qian dismissed the idea of running. Emperor Yuanjing had tasked him with earning merit to atone for his crimes. So, Wei Yuan was responsible for keeping this death row inmate in check. If he fled, it would implicate Wei Yuan. Of course, that wasn't the main reason. Even if Su Qian could escape, the citizens of the capital couldn't. If a battle between 1st-rank experts really broke out in the capital, how many lives would be lost? Those were human lives after all. A distant earthquake. Old rascal. He's surrounded by many experts in the palace. But what about the ordinary people in the city? I have no place in the grudges of top-tier experts. Now the only solution is to make this matter public. Naturally, someone higher up will handle it. Su Qian immediately made up his mind. When in doubt, go to Wei Yuan. Although he was reluctant to admit it, Wei Yuan, with his illustrious reputation and cunning, truly gave people a sense of security. If Wei Yuan were just a mediocre official, Su Qian would have fled days ago to seek out rogue governors. Soon, Su Qian reached the 7th floor. But before Wei Yuan spoke first. The case is progressing well, but the trail has gone cold again. The court has issued a wanted notice for Zhou Qixiang, but finding him within half a month is clearly unrealistic. So what's the plan now? Su Qian stood at the desk and thought for a moment, then calmly replied, Sir, I suspect Zhou Qixiang has a secret backer, but we don't have any leads. This case is more complicated and troublesome than the tax silver incident. The trail may be cold now, but I already have a general direction for further investigation. First, examine the magical artifacts that could block the detection of energy weapons. Second, review the lists of individuals who have the channels and resources to smuggle gunpowder into Sang country. Although this approach will take a lot of effort, it might not yield results. Su Qian then asked Wei Yuan, and if I still haven't found the truth within half a month? Wei Yuan slowly set down his teacup and said warmly, then I'll arrange for you to fake your death and escape. You'll go into the Jianghu and serve as a night patrolman on the rivers and lakes. The Yamen's intelligence network spans 13 provinces and all the major Jianghu factions. It's impossible for the court to secretly sustain a hidden agent. Your temperament doesn't suit the official route. The Jianghu is where you belong. Actually, if not for Sang's instability, I would have already arranged for you to leave the capital. Su Qian thought vaguely. To go into the Jianghu? Wei Yuan chuckled, as if wielding a blade in his hand. A blade that cannot see the light of day. Do you feel wronged? Your temperament is gentle on the outside, but firm on the inside. It's a bit extreme. I both appreciate and dislike that about you. I'm well aware of the many shortcomings within the Night Watcher Yamen, but human nature is inherently complex. Light and darkness intertwine. How many people are truly like Li Yuchen? If all the Night Watchers were like Li Yuchen, they wouldn't be able to suppress the entire Su Qian frowned. I understand this reasoning, which is why human nature needs constant scrutiny. Only through consistent deterrence can we maintain order and clarity. Are you perhaps being too lenient with your subordinates? Wei Yuan explained calmly. It depends on the timing. The bureaucratic atmosphere of the Great Feng dynasty is corrupt. The decay is deep-rooted. To change this, one must blend in with the light and shadows, then dismantle it step by step. Only when the obstacles in your path are cleared can you truly act freely. Su Qian considered this and found it reasonable. Wei Yuan's implication was that once he had defeated his political enemies and there were no more barriers, he would then have the opportunity to clean up the corruption. Wei Yuan spoke earnestly. You're bound by rules in the officialdom, forced to adapt to the environment. Otherwise, you'd keep encountering one problem after another, or you'd lose your sharp edges, losing the boldness of a warrior. Either way, it's not worth it. But in the Jianghu, you have no such constraints. Anyone who obstructs or opposes you, just cut them down with your blade. Act according to your conscience, without worrying about rules and laws. This is what it means to push boundaries by force. However, many warriors lose themselves in this process, becoming cold-blooded and merciless executioners. That's something you need to be cautious about. After holding back for a long time, Su Qian said, I'm not ready to enter the Jianghu. I want to give it my best effort first. It wasn't because he clung to power, but because he missed his family. He missed his uncle, aunt, Erlang, and his younger sister. It's just like in a past life, working as a sharpshooter. When the boss said he was sending you to a distant province to expand the market, to live there long term, you'd say, I don't want to go. The boss would say, no, you don't have a choice. Luckily, Wei Yuan wasn't that kind of tyrant boss. He didn't force things. Instead, he smiled indifferently and said, no problem, you may step back. Su Qian looked slyly at the two golden gongs. Nan Gong Qianro felt a chill. Su Qian ignored him and cupped his fists, saying, please, retire out of fairness. Nan Gong Qianro was incensed. This damn bronze gong. He's asking us to leave again. Wei Yuan waved his hand, motioning for the two of them to leave the Qilo. Angry for a moment, Nan Gong Qianro, familiar with this by now, decided it wasn't worth complaining. He and Yang Yan left silently. The tea room was now empty except for two people. Wei Yuan poured Su Qian a cup of tea. Then, in a calm voice, he asked about the Heaven and Earth Society. Surprised by the gesture, Su Qian accepted the tea and took a sip. It was slightly bitter at first, but left a clean aftertaste. Indeed, the Heaven and Earth Society had received news. It came from number 5 of the society, a member of the southern barbarian clans. This person had some status and had sent a message through a communication artifact yesterday, stating that signs of the ancient god's resurgence had been detected in Ji Garden. They carried some weight. Wei Yuan's expression grew serious as he said, during the Jiazi cycle, demons lie dormant, and the ancient gods are suppressed by the barbarian clans and the Wanyao kingdom. There's been no trouble so far. But now that the Wanyao kingdom is gone, their lands are covered in Buddhist temples, and there are few top-tier experts left. If the ancient gods truly awaken, the barbarian clans likely won't be able to withstand them. At this point, his expression darkened as he continued, the ancient gods' resurgence, the madness of the Taoists, and the unusual phenomena at the Yunlu Academy. All these events suggest that something ominous is approaching. Such unrest often heralds a year of great chaos. Wei Yuan sighed. In recent years, the Buddhist sects have become increasingly ambitious. Su Qian's heart stirred. Back then, the Buddhists wiped out the Wanyao kingdom to spread their teachings. Wei Yuan calmly asked, was it truly for the people of the world? After a pause, he continued, go on. You need to report to me. Su Qian straightened his expression. He said, sir, I've identified the sealed item beneath Sangpa. It's connected to a secret from 500 years ago. This matter could lead to disaster. I lack the strength to handle it, and dared not keep it hidden. Hearing this, Wei Yuan's eyes flashed with a peculiar light. He probed, the sealed item? Su Qian nodded. It's a rogue minister. The first rogue minister is sealed beneath Sangpa. Back then, Wuzong relied on virtue to usurp the throne. The first rogue minister didn't support him. After Wuzong ascended the throne, there were no more records of the first rogue minister in the official histories. Wei Yuan listened impassively. He nodded slightly. That analysis is very reasonable. Su Qian seized the opportunity to add, the Yuanjing emperor still hasn't made this public. Everyone is being kept in the dark. But if the first rogue minister were to clash with the current one, then the capital. He left the sentence unfinished, trusting that Wei Yuan's wisdom would grasp his meaning. Wei Yuan held his teacup, staring at the blue and white patterns on it. Abruptly, he changed the subject. Have you felt any abdominal discomfort recently? Su Qian was startled. How did Wei Yuan know? He thought. He replied, these days, when practicing qi, I felt an uncomfortable pressure in my abdomen, like a fire burning inside. Wei Yuan nodded. Good. This indicates you've reached a solid foundational level in qi practice. Eventually, this pressure will rise to the middle dantian, and then to the upper dantian. When that happens, you'll be ready to enter the spiritual realm of cultivation. Although I've studied books, I'm not proficient in martial arts. Still, I've accumulated some experience that I can share with you. When the discomfort shifts to your middle dantian, I'll have someone deliver a visualization technique to you. This will help speed up your progress toward the spirit refining stage. Once you reach that stage, you'll need to strengthen your body anew, aiming to become thoroughly familiar with it. But that's something for the future. Su Qian suddenly felt a sense of balance. Although Wei Yuan was brilliant, he wasn't naturally gifted at martial arts. Thank you for your guidance, Wei Gong. I'll do my best to repay you. Wei Yuan joked. You're not a hot-headed fool, but sometimes you're even more rash than one. Su Qian silently retorted. That's not recklessness, it's principle. A belief in Marxism, you could say. At the same time, he thought sadly to himself, this is one of the fundamental rifts between me. Wei Yuan gazed at Su Qian. There's something else you should know. Today, the emperor issued an edict to lift the city's lockdown. Su Qian froze, his face filled with disbelief. The emperor's attitude is problematic. If the first rogue minister breaks free, the most immediate threat will be to the current rogue minister and the royal family. Under these circumstances, shouldn't the standard approach be to close the gates, deal with the problem, and ensure the threat is permanently eliminated? What's the meaning behind opening the gates? Extending goodwill to the first rogue minister? Coexisting peacefully? Impossible. Though the emperor may be an inept ruler, he's no fool. Moreover, the current rogue minister wouldn't allow the emperor to betray the regime. The rogue minister's behavior is also odd. When the teacher was captured, shouldn't he have rallied his sorcerers, stomped on the coffin lid, and shouted, "Hold it down, everyone! Keep that old bastard sealed." But instead, he's feigning illness. Is there a deeper reason behind all this? Perhaps the first rogue minister, after 500 years of being sealed, is no longer at his peak. If he's still recovering somewhere, then opening the gates might be a trap to draw him out. Perhaps they intend to shift the battlefield outside the capital. Leaving the curiosity building, Su Qian smiled bitterly. There are so many questions right now. Returning to Spring Breeze Paradise, Su Qian gathered his men and issued 3 orders. The first was for Chu Kaiwei of the Directorate of Astronomy to investigate the whereabouts of the artifact that conceals one's aura. The second was for Ingong's Min Shan and Yang Feng to continue verifying the records of gunpowder production and usage. Third was to go to the Yamen to interrogate the magistrate of Taikang County. Li Yuchen asked puzzled, why interrogate the Taikang magistrate? Su Qian explained, don't you find it odd? How did the demon race know about the Shao family's mine on Mount Dahuang? Clearly, someone colluded with them. Mount Dahuang is in Taikang County. There must be something wrong with the magistrate there. The 3 Ingongs respectfully nodded. This Su Tonglua's meticulous investigation experience is not without reason. At the Yamen gates, the group split up to carry out their tasks. Su Qian was asked, Leader, why not summon the sorcerers from the Directorate of Astronomy to question the court officials? Li Yuchen looked at the actors, his former subordinates, and now he was subordinate to them. You just had Kaiwei investigate the aura-concealing artifact. Sorcerers are still people, and people can be bribed. For ordinary small cases, it doesn't matter. But for cases involving major officials, you can't just rely on the sorcerer's testimony. The Yuanjing Emperor's suspicious nature and strong recovery instinct caused Su Qian to feel a bit hesitant. Song Tingfeng found an opportunity to speak up. Ming Yan, you're familiar with Chu Kaiwei of the Directorate of Astronomy, right? Su Qian nodded. Song Tingfeng cautiously said, I have a friend who's been feeling weak lately. I was hoping to get some tonic medicine for him. Su Qian was speechless. Why are you making things up to me? But he didn't expose him. Instead, Su Qian replied with a smile, tell your friend to cut back on playing Russian roulette. Li Yuchen frowned, utterly puzzled. What roulette? Su Qian, Zhu Guangxiao, and Song Tingfeng exchanged smiles and began playing dumb. The lecture at Yunlu Academy finally ended after more than 2 hours. The headmaster concluded his long admonition. After inspiring the students to study diligently, he gently waved his sleeve. In the next moment, his figure abruptly vanished. The students were accustomed to this sight, no longer amazed. They started discussing the recent major events that had taken place in the capital. How did Sangbo get blown up? That was the sacred ground of the founding emperor of the Great Feng, yet it was destroyed by some petty thugs. Su Xinyan packed his books, preparing to leave. A student behind him called out, Su Xinyan, care to join us for a trip to the countryside? Su Xinyan shook his head and warned, black hair doesn't last forever. Study while you can. When you're old, you'll regret not reading more books. Another student said mockingly, Su Xinyan is already in the self-improvement realm. He's not like the rest of us anymore. He probably looks down on us. The one speaking was Zhu Tuizhi. Back when Song Ziyang traveled to Qinzhou, Zhu had expected to gain the great scholar Ziyang's favor, but Su Xinyan had unexpectedly taken that opportunity. Su Erlang sneered, don't falsely accuse me in broad daylight. When have I ever looked down on you? Zhu Tuizhi became furious. Su Xinyan, don't think that reaching the 8th rank makes you invincible. You've only gotten a head start, that's all. Su Erlang replied nonchalantly, I stepped into the self-improvement realm without breaking a sweat. Am I proud of it? I visited the eldest princess recently and earned her admiration. Am I proud of that? Later I'll consult my teacher to strengthen my cultivation and learn insights from the 7th rank. Am I proud of that? Other students began to feel offended. Su Erlang looked at Zhu Tuiji's face and suddenly let out a mocking laugh. Zhu Tuiji glared at him and asked, "What are you laughing at?" Su Ci said, "Rescuing Qing Mie Dao. Some people's faces are as ugly as an unjust case." Zhu Tui exploded on the spot. "What did you say?" In a fit of holy rage, he was about to lunge at Su Xinyan for a duel, but was firmly stopped by the bronze window. Su Xinyan proudly walked away. These people, once you ignore them for a while, they think they've woken up again. When it comes to arguments, I, Su Ci, have never been outdone in my life. The Zhao Manor governs 15 counties around the capital. The Taikang County magistrate is imprisoned in the manor's dungeon. Su Qian entered the manor on behalf of others, and loudly declared he was there to interrogate the Taikang County official Zhao magistrate. The steward asked if he had a handwritten order from the prefect. Song Tingfeng shook his head. The steward immediately became less polite. "Please leave. Without the proper order, you can't take the prisoner. Are the night watchmen getting too arrogant? Outside, we might let you have your way. But this is the Tiger's Tooth Manor. You can't just interrogate someone whenever you please." Just then, Xiao Fuiying returned and overheard. Her expression changed slightly. "How dare you obstruct the night watchman's work? Get out of my way immediately." After scolding them, she promptly ordered someone to escort Su Qian and his people to the dungeon. The steward felt wronged. "Vice Prefect, this goes against regulations." Xiao Fuiying sneered. "Rules? Your life is on the line, and you're worried about rules?" The steward was taken aback. "What do you mean, Vice Prefect?" Xiao Fuiying replied. "That man is Su Qian, the same Su Qian who killed someone in broad daylight. He's a lunatic. Do you want to die along with him?" The steward broke out in a cold sweat. "Thank you, Vice Prefect, for saving my life." Inside the manor's dungeon, Su Qian was slightly moved. He'd once lived here. He had some old acquaintances, like Jerry and Little Chong. Under the lead of the guard, they soon arrived at the cell where Zhao Magistrate was held. The guard knocked on the bars with his stick. "There's someone here to question you." Zhao Magistrate, dressed in prison garb, lay on a tattered straw mat. He was lying on his side, completely still, his back to everyone. Su Qian's heart sank. Something felt wrong. A sense of unease struck him. The guard took out a key and opened the door, angrily reaching out to pull Zhao Magistrate up. "Are you deaf? I told you to get up. Didn't you hear me?" Zhao Magistrate's limp body turned over. His pupils were pale. He had been dead for some time. The guard was so startled he collapsed to the floor, repeating over and over, "He's dead. He's dead."